My British Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Lively Racecourse. Edward slowly led Arthur to the racecourse while thinking about whether to subdue Grenville. Yes, Edward is going to want to have such a Secretary of State, a position equivalent to that of the Prime Minister. The English name of the Secretary of State is Secretary of State, also known as the Secretary of State. This position was originally just a personal assistant, secretary, to the king, but during the Tudor dynasty, this position was involved in the implementation of the king's main government affairs, especially directly involved in court politics. As a result, he became powerful and popular. Before the emergence of the cabinet, the Secretary of State actually performed the functions and powers of the cabinet on behalf of the cabinet, and had the same power as the Mengshi province in the Tang dynasty of China and the General Administration Department and Secretary Supervisor in the Ming dynasty. Today, the Cabinet Secretary in the UK, who is actually in charge of the affairs of various ministries, called Second Minister in Japan, and the Secretary of State in the United States are in fact the continuation of the concept of this position. It was Thomas Cromwell who flourished in this position. This is a politician who reformed with Zhang Zhejiang of the Ming dynasty in China in the 16th century. It is no exaggeration to say that he is Xiangyang of England, a figure who forged England's sovereignty. And it has a sad ending. Like Xiangyang. Strictly speaking, medieval Britain was only a geographical concept, not a country in the modern sense. The external sovereignty of the country was incomplete due to the interference of the Holy See. The internal sovereignty of the country could not operate normally because the feudal aristocrats had independent economic, military and judicial powers. The power of the king cannot be exercised in the territory of the nobles, and some border areas in Wales are still independent of state power. There is no strict distinction between state affairs and royal household affairs. The Reformation brought an opportunity for the emergence of the British nation-state. Cromwell was acutely aware of this when he came to power in the 1630s. Cromwell relied on the power of the state, relied on the support of the Parliament, and used the religious reform as a breakthrough to skillfully integrate the king's personal motives into the overall interests of the nation-state, promulgated a series of bills, and broke the Pope's control over the secular state, establishing the external sovereignty of the country. In 1533, under the auspices of Cromwell, Parliament passed the Appeal Act. The bill clearly declares that this England is a sovereign state. The king has supreme power and can judge all actions of all people, including monks and lay people. The monks and lay people under the king form political societies, each enjoying judicial administration in the religious and secular spheres, are free from any interference from powers outside the empire. The announcement of the Bill of Appeal not only legally blocked the channel for the Holy See to interfere in British affairs through judicial litigation cases, but also caused a break with Rome. In fact, severed the link between Britain and the Holy See, and established the independent sovereignty within its territory. And Grenville is not only rich in reformist thinking, but also has a bold heart that is not afraid of hardships and dangers. As soon as he walked near the racecourse, Edward felt a heat wave lingering in the air, which was particularly refreshing in this cold season in England, as if he smelled something. Arthur became emotional in an instant. He raised the horse's hooves, raised the horse's head, and ran into the racecourse while pulling Edward. He didn't care whether Edward's thin body could pass through it then. The knights in the racecourse saw a snow-white colt pulling a short king and running to Grenville, and Edward has been stalking the horse with a perplexed expression on his face, and today he finally felt what it was like to be stalked by the horse. "It's so sour, I can't believe it." When Edward came to his senses, dozens of guards in Grenville all surrounded him, staring at him curiously. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a horse?" Edward said angrily. "What should I do?" Seeing that Edward was annoyed, everyone walked away wisely. After all, Edward was their employer, so it was not easy to provoke him as a guest. Grenville was too embarrassed to laugh at the host, so he continued his way of acting. But before he left, his big black horse grinned at Arthur. It was definitely not Edward's dazzle, but a real smile. Suddenly, Edward felt the rein in his hand increase again. Knowing that Arthur was having trouble again, Edward slapped the pony's ass hard without hesitation. Now, the depression in Edward's heart finally dissipated a lot. Regardless of Arthur's teary-eyed expression, Edward led him to watch the knights contest performance. Holding Arthur by the hand, he stood leisurely on the periphery, watching Grenville compete with a strong guard. First of all, the two were put on chainmail by the attendants, and then helped onto the horses by the attendants, and they were adjusted to their respective states. The strong knight was named Sean, the son of a knight. He was extremely strong, with a height of more than 6 feet. According to the metric system, it should be 1.9 meters. It's a long white coat chain armor, also known as chain armor, but there is one more thing. Please seriously distinguish between chain armor and chain armor. These are two different concepts. Generally speaking, chain armor is much lower in density than chain armor, is a kind of armor that appeared in the Iron Cold weapon era, and it is a major innovation since the advent of leather armor. Used small iron rings to form a long coat with a hood, which is covered outside the close-fitting clothing. All the weight is borne by the shoulders, which can effectively protect sharp weapons such as swords, guns and spears. The biggest disadvantage is that it is soft, and it is difficult to resist a sharp sword. If it is a heavy weapon such as a meteor hammer or a mace, the chainmail will fail. Don't look down on chainmail just because it is common. The cost of a full set of chainmail equipment for a knight in the 11th and 12th centuries was equivalent to that of a small farm, and in the serf system in the Middle Ages, armor masters were also upper-class civilians who could sit on an equal footing with priests and were generally respected. Chainmail is generally a kind of armor made of many iron lock pieces fastened together. It is an upper body armor, which can protect the shoulders and arms at the top and protect the knees at the bottom. The size of the iron chain pieces is about the same as that of a coin, and the chain armor that tightly fastens many iron chain pieces together has a strong protection ability against cold weapons. Although there are holes, it has the effect of impenetrable to swords and guns, and impenetrable to arrows. In terms of its protective power, in ancient times, it was only inferior to the Beringia of the Song dynasty because of the high price and strong defensive power. Chainmail has also become an essential equipment for knights, and is very popular among knights in Western Europe. In Western Europe in the Middle Ages, just as China measured national power by chariots in the spring and autumn period, they measured the strength of nobles by the number of knights. Thanks to Minhang Menghua, NRPHF 5, Lily 599, Hanbing's IAE, I'm kidding, XG Jason, everyone's support. Chapter 27. It is said that the two of them are preparing seriously under the eyes of many knights. The big man moved his arms and stretched his neck, and there was a crackling bone sound in the ears of the crowd eating melons, which caused uncontrollable exclamations from the crowd eating melons. The big man Sean was very satisfied with the exclamation of the audience. He thought it was everyone's support and trust in him. Sean gave Grenville a look that could make you surrender. Grenville was not intimidated by Sean's performance at all. He stroked the big black horse very calmly, murmured and didn't know what to say, because it was a bit far away. Edward didn't hear anything. In fact, he was not the only one. Almost no one heard what he said to horse. Why say almost? Because our lovely and beautiful Princess Elizabeth has come to this place where knights play. It's a pity that her King Edward didn't see the slightest trace of his sister, because of whose stature Elizabeth was dressed in the same clothes as ordinary guards, with an iron mask on her face, her long hair curled up quietly in the iron helmet, a beard hanging under her lips. At some point, she looked extraordinarily handsome with the mask off. Can tell if I'm male or female? Elizabeth stared at the calm Grenville without blinking, watching how he comforted his mount and how to give it a little bit of confidence. For the first time, Elizabeth felt that men still have a careful side. Don't ask her how she knew what Grenville said to his big dark horse. I'll tell you, Elizabeth knows a little bit of lip reading. Grenville didn't know that a 14-year-old girl was interested in him in the audience. He chatted with a big dark horse and almost devoted himself to it. Time passed quietly, and half an hour had passed in a short while, and the big Sean's bones were about to be broken. But the conversation between Grenville and the big dark horse seemed to have not ended yet. Hey, dude. How can you compare? This weather is so rare. The melon-eating crowd couldn't sit still, and a guard with a beard opened his mouth and shouted, if you don't compare, come down, don't waste our time. The voice of the big man seemed to bring Grenville back to reality, and he also ended the conversation with the big dark horse and pulled down his mask immediately. The atmosphere at the scene became tense. All the melon-eaters held their breath and stared at the two players on the field without blinking, fearing to disturb the contestants. Edward also instantly abandoned other distracting thoughts, staring at the knights motionless. Can't blame them for making a fuss, mainly because there were too few entertainment activities at that time. Ordinary knights do nothing more than have sex every day and go to taverns to drink. At this time, dramas are still lowly entertainment activities. Only peasants in the countryside like to watch them. There is an upsurge of martial arts among the extremely boring knight class. One can relieve the usual energy, and the other can use it to gamble and earn a little money. At this rare moment, The audience had already bought bets before the game. The odds of the Big Sean betting on him were 1.1, while the odds of the Grenville Cavaliers from afar were 1.2. And almost all the Cavaliers bought Sean to win, even though his odds were frighteningly low. Only the Princess Elizabeth cast 10 shillings to buy Grenville to win, thereby earning a jeering sound. The two raised the spear without a head, and the top of the spear was tied with sackcloth filled with lime, and then they had to carry out 3 rounds of riding spears. The thrusting of spears is a major feature of knightly contests, which is called hurton, sprint. Related terms, both from French, since Frank is the hometown of jousting, are pointer, starting, punis, impact, punirin, sprinting with a spear, sambilirin, legs clamped, calopirin, sprint, lisirin, releasing the reins, etc. Generally, the knight holds the shield and the reins in his left hand, raises the spear in his right hand, and at the same time pinches the horse with his legs and controls the horse with spurs until he hits the target. Occasionally slashing with a sword on horseback gives rise to the term slatton, and purely spearing is called stutchen. There are 2 important skills in spear sprinting, which may only attack the opponent's 2 doors. The spear should hit the 4 nails on the shield or the place where the helmet belt is tied. In the contest, hitting the above 2 targets accurately is a knight's skill. The essence of the reason for attacking the place with 4 rivets on the shield is that it is the rivet where the handle is exposed, which is relatively fragile, and once hit, there is a high probability that the enemy's hand can be abolished, thus making him lose his combat effectiveness. The reason why the attack helmet is tied is because it cannot be completely covered by the shield. Once stabbed, it is easy to break through the neck armor, and even directly penetrate the neck, causing a fatal blow to the opponent. Therefore, once a knight hits these 2 positions properly in the contest, generally speaking, the victory or defeat will be divided. The 2 legs were tightly clamping the horse's belly, and their left hands were holding a long shield, and they were holding the reins tightly by the way. Each right hand holds a 7-foot-long spear. The eyes under the mask became sharper than ever, his hands showed bursting blue meridians, the muscles in his thighs were stretched, and the heart in his chest was pumping blood rapidly. Suddenly, the 2 rushed forward at the same time, and the entire racecourse shook. Boom. The 2 horses approached quickly. From a distance, their heads almost collided. The audience below, including Edward, were already watching with excitement, but they couldn't make a sound, let alone what a pain. In other words, when the 2 horses were about to collide, the 2 of them pinched the horse's belly, and the horses also turned their heads in a tacit understanding, and each missed. However, at the moment they missed, they raised their shields and collided with each other, making a deafening sound. The moment the shields touched, some sawdust burst out, showing how powerful the impact was. The 2 swung their spears and stabbed at the neck. The Big Sean tilted his head to avoid the blow, but he exerted more strength with his right arm. Grenville's strength was not as strong as Sean's. At this time, his left arm was a little numb from the shock, and his right arm stabbed at Sean with some imbalance, but Sean dodged it lightly. Facing the powerful blow from Sean, Grenville bent down and reluctantly dodged it, causing the knights below to exclaim. There was no winner in the first round. The big man Zion had a slight upper hand, and then came the second round. In the second round, Grenville was shocked by Sean's strength and lost his balance. Even though he was prepared, he still couldn't withstand his impact. He could only dodge the fatal blow skillfully with his flexible body. Grenville was determined to win this game, challenging the impossible. Thanks, Hanma, who wants to know, graffiti tty, Prussian nobleman, Fenya has been in the Aurora for 3,000 years, Yuli Yefimovich Shelov, Hizi, Li Guangman, Xinghayu, Hanbingziae, Lily 599, it's a joke, everyone's big vote support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28, Leaving After Victory. Grenville thought about how to defeat Sean and defend his dignity as a knight. I have no advantage in strength, because I should use wisdom and skill to win, and my buddy. Grenville on the horse, thinking, hey, dude, it's up to you. Grenville lowered his head and whispered into the dark horse's ear, use the trick we did with abundance last time. The big black horse snorted, as if responding to Grenville. Elizabeth, who was below, couldn't guess what Grenville said because of the mask blocking her. She was unconsciously nervous, and her hands were sweating. Sean on the opposite side is happily chatting with his supporters. For Zion, although the strength of the strange knight in front of him is not bad, it is still not comparable to him. As long as he works harder, victory is within his pocket, and it is easy to get as a result. Sean's laughter became louder and more presumptuous, as if deliberately demonstrating against Grenville. Hearing Sean's laughter, Grenville's calm state of mind fluctuated a little. He frowned slightly, and then relaxed again. This movement was very slight, and there was no one except Elizabeth who had been paying attention to him. People see Elizabeth looked at Grenville carefully, and when she saw that her brows were frowning, some sweat subconsciously burst out of her palms. After Grenville was ready, he straightened his armor, and the big Sean also started to prepare. After seeing his movements, the two rode on horses, separated by a distance of 100 feet, and began to gain momentum. Suddenly, the two of them seemed to have discussed it, and they started to rush forward together. Grenville turned his body slightly, as if he was doing something, and Zion also saw him like this, and sneered in his heart indifferently. He has always believed in the principle that power is king. In the face of absolute power, all tricks can. What is slag? What Sean hates the most is intrigue. He has always believed that such a person is not worthy of being a knight. Thinking of this, Zion instantly had an idea in his mind to teach him a lesson. The strength of his grip on the spear in his hand increased a lot. The look on his face suddenly showed a hint of ferocity, and the shield shrank back a little. Sean recklessly urged the black horse on his crotch to rush forward, while Grenville stared at Sean's front with all his attention, as if he was calculating something. The steps of the big black horse on his crotch were also much smaller, with slowing trend. When the distance between the two was less than a foot, the big black horse suddenly jumped upwards, and the horse seemed to stand upright, almost perpendicular to the ground at nearly 80 degrees. Standing upright on two hind legs like a human being, the melanating crowd below lost their voices. Edward also seemed to feel like he was watching a movie, which was hard to see in reality. Just like last time, when the two of them were about to collide, Sean took the lead to veer away, and Grenville was waiting for this opportunity. He took the lead in making the move, swung the shield with his hand and slammed into Sean, and suddenly a powerful force was reflected, which felt much stronger than the previous two times. Sean seemed to be surprised by Grenville's first move, especially the astonishing leap of the big black horse, which broke through his knowledge of horses. It wasn't until the huge impact of the shield that Sean was awakened. He gritted his teeth tightly and hurriedly pushed back with all his strength, even so hard that his body tilted towards Grenville uncontrollably. Grenville had anticipated Sean's counterattack long ago, and quickly shrank his body back, using distance to counteract Sean's strength. Grenville seized this rare opportunity, taking advantage of the rare opportunity of Sean's loss of body balance. Quickly he raised the spear in his left hand vigorously, stabbing towards Sean's neck vigorously, and Sean saw the spear stabbing towards him from the corner of his eye, and quickly backed away. But how could Grenville let him do what he wanted? At such a short distance, Grenville's spear easily touched Sean's neck. Under the amazed eyes of the audience, Grenville's spear stabbed the big man Sean's neck without hindrance, and Sean's body also fell uncontrollably from the horse onto the horse field full of earthy fragrance. There was already a bright white mark on his neck. Soon, Grenville was surrounded by a large wave of guards, and people crowded towards him cheering, happy for him like celebrating a hero. Grenville was a little uncomfortable with this atmosphere. He managed to get out of the crowd, and saw Sean being supported by his partner to stand up. His face was full of resignation. "Hey, dude, you are amazing." Grenville walked over, took off his helmet, and said to the big man Sean in a solemn tone, "Of course, I lost to you because of my carelessness. Otherwise, you would definitely not be my opponent." Sean said with a bit of resentment in his tone, "However, your riding skills are also very good." I don't know if he was moved by Grenville's words or something, but his attitude changed a lot. The two immediately shook hands, and a feeling of mutual sympathy spread in their hearts after seeing Grenville's victory. Elizabeth quietly left without taking a speck of dust with her. In the evening, Edward invited Grenville to have dinner together. "Dear knight, I'm really happy for you," Edward said excitedly. "You don't know, among the guards, Sean is the most powerful, and you beat him. It's really exciting. Your Excellency, the Baron, you are overwhelmed, mainly because of my buddy Harry," Grenville said modestly. In the Middle Ages, it was difficult to see the quality of humility in proud knights, but Edward only saw it in Grenville, which made Edward's desire to recruit him even stronger. When Edward was chatting with Grenville, Princess Elizabeth kept her head down and ate dinner without saying a word. She looked very ladylike, and Edward was still a little uncomfortable. The three of them finished their dinner, and after the maid cleaned up, they started chatting. "Mr. Knight, I don't know how your family is?" Elizabeth first raised the topic. After asking, she felt a little shy and lowered her head again. I came out when I was 17, and it's been 3 years since my wife went to God after giving birth to my son. Grenville said, making prayer gestures. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean it. Elizabeth explained with a hint of joy. It's all right. Beautiful lady, said Grenville, it's God's will. What are your plans? Mr. Knight. Edward asked immediately. Thank you, Baron, for your hospitality. I'm going back tomorrow. Grenville's tone was a little embarrassed. Oh, sir, won't you play for a while? No. My relatives are already looking forward to my return. Grenville explained, besides, I miss them too, thanks to XG Jason, Prussian nobleman, Hemp, Hanbings IAE, Kankasterku, 2ITTY, everyone's support. Chapter 29. The Speech in the House of Lords. As soon as Grenville's words fell, Elizabeth lowered her head, and her face suddenly turned pale like a thread, which was particularly distressing. Damn. So precocious, I thought he was a 30-year-old uncle? Grenville's words fell into Edward's ears, and he couldn't help complaining in his heart. Leaving aside the issue of age, Edward didn't notice the change in Elizabeth's face, but was just thinking about recruiting Grenville now. The solicitation is too straightforward, and it is embarrassing that Edward does not have the slightest right to appoint anyone around the Regency Council, so Edward decided to build his own team 2 years later when he really exercised his rights. By the way, observe whether there are any outstanding talents in the next 2 years, and then compare them to see who is most suitable for the position of Secretary of State. After thinking for a while, Edward finally saw his elder sister Elizabeth's pale face, and her white and tender skin became as pale as a vampire. Elizabeth, are you okay? Edward hurriedly got up, came to Elizabeth's side, and shook her gently with his hand. It's okay, Edward. I'm just a little uncomfortable. Elizabeth regained her composure and said to Edward, Lucy, hurry up and help Your Royal Highness back to the room, and then call Your Excellency Fitzralph to see Her Royal Highness. Edward commanded Lucy anxiously. The anxiety in his heart was fully revealed on his face, and he could no longer maintain the status of nobleman. A calm look. It's all right, Edward. Don't bother Mr. Ralph. Elizabeth was stunned by Edward's appearance, and there was a slight warmth in her heart, and she was very moved by her brother's concern. Hearing that Elizabeth said it was all right, Edward thought that Elizabeth's pale face was caused by the woman's monthly best friend arriving and losing too much blood, and he was relieved immediately. Then, Lucy, take Her Royal Highness back to her room to rest, and prepare some brown sugar water for her. Edward then ordered to Lucy, using what he didn't know much about Mr. Richard. I'm sorry, Elizabeth said to Grenville when she was helped away by Lucy. It's okay. You go to rest first. A beautiful lady is not beautiful if she is sick. Grenville joked at the right time, which eased Elizabeth's mood. Mr. Richard is not only a wise and brave knight, but also a humorous gentleman. Elizabeth was supported by Lucy to the bedroom, and she couldn't help thinking of Grenville on the way. The more I thought about it, the more flushed my face became. Mr. Knight, when are you going to leave tomorrow? Edward asked about Grenville's itinerary. I'm going to leave tomorrow morning. Thank you for your hospitality. You are such a generous nobleman. Grenville couldn't help but sigh. The next morning, Grenville took the clothes and 10-pound gold coins presented by Edward, led his big black horse, and stood upright in front of the gate of Windsor Manor, looking extraordinarily heroic. Elizabeth changed into a white dress with lace trim, and stood at the door in a pretty way, seeing off Grenville with Edward. Goodbye, Your Excellency the Baron, and the lovely Miss Elizabeth. Grenville turned over beautifully, and immediately rode on the back of the big black horse. Arthur appeared suddenly at some point, and spat at the big black horse under Grenville's crotch, and Harry, the big dark horse, spat at each other not to be outdone. The big black horse was taller than Arthur, so all of Arthur's saliva sprayed on the big black horse's legs, and the big black horse's saliva sprayed directly on Arthur's horse's face. Obviously, Arthur lost. Arthur stood behind Edward with an aggrieved expression, pushing him, wanting Edward to avenge him. Edward didn't bother to care about it, and slapped its buttocks. Suddenly, Arthur fell silent. Hey, dude. When you come to London later, we'll entertain you and let you taste what real good wine is. The big man Sean's voice was extraordinarily loud, and it sounded like thunder in Edward's ears. Edward's eardrum hurt. Sean and Grenville didn't know each other, and they became good friends immediately. Within less than a day. There will be such a day, buddy. Next time we meet, I hope you can beat me once. Ha ha ha. Grenville walked a little farther, turned around and shouted at Sean, damn it, you won't have such good luck next time. I will definitely beat you so hard that you dare not get on the horse. Sean shouted at Grenville angrily, and the people around him quickly covered their ears. He looked terrified, and Edward had a foresight long ago, and hurriedly covered his ears the moment Grenville replied, protecting his ears best. At this time, in the House of Lords in London, Edward's uncle, His Excellency Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, was standing in the speech position of the House of Lords, explaining his proposal. Dear members of Parliament, distinguished nobles, I am here to solve a problem that the previous king has always wanted to solve. The Duke of Somerset also knew to move out Henry VIII to gain the support of nobles loyal to the royal family. We have always known that the heretics of the Catholic Church headed by the greedy Pope in Rome have not only betrayed God's original ideas, but have always wanted to control every move of our England. They are judging the people of England with heresy ideas that betray God. How dare they openly violate the laws of England and the wishes of the entire English people? The behavior of the heretics in Rome not only needs to be stopped, but also corrected, so that the servants of God can return to God's side. Gentlemen, let us treat God with reverence, so, let's act. Crack, crack, crack. The Duke of Somerset's speech received unanimous applause from the MPs below, and the nobles recognized his idea immediately afterwards. The members of Parliament abolished the treason law, heretic law, and 6 articles of faith with Catholic overtones. Treason law is a new law established by Henry VIII through Parliament in 1534. It stipulates that anyone who slanders the king is a heretic, schismatic, tyrant, etc. by speech, writing, or actions does not recognize the king as the head of the church and denies the king. Anyone who is legally married is treason and punishable by death. Heresy laws were Henry VIII's statutes dealing with other denominations in England, including Catholicism, and Protestantism, including Lutheranism. The 6 articles of faith was a product of Henry VIII's dealing with the bourgeoisie. The spread of emerging bourgeois ideas and the awakening of the lower classes made Henry VIII terrified that further reforms would endanger his rule. In 1539, he personally presided over the formulation of the 6 Creeds law, which stipulated that the main Catholic teachings and ceremonies such as the Trinity, Incarnation, Mass, Confession, and priestly celibacy must be followed, and those who violated it would be punished with death. Once Edward Seymour's bill was passed, the ideological authoritarian atmosphere from the later period of Henry VIII disappeared, and the period of religious tolerance came. Thanks. Just kidding. 12,422,290. Lancaster coup, Book Friend 191 XXXX78. There is nothing wrong with ignorance. 10,000 people rule the world. Everyone's support. Chapter 30. The King in the House. The predecessor of the British Parliament can be traced back to the Anglo Parliament from the 5th to the 7th century AD. Saxon period. In the middle of the 5th century, Angles, Saxons and Jutes invaded Britain, taking advantage of the power vacuum that emerged after the Romans withdrew from Britain. They successively conquered Britain and established 7 kingdoms. Large and small British historians call the period from the end of the 6th century to 870 the 7 Kingdoms Age. In these kingdoms, representatives of the king and nobles jointly formed a sage council. The main function of the Council of Sages is to assist the king in handling state affairs and to determine the successor of the kingdom according to the hereditary principle. During the development of the Norman dynasty, William I, the Norman duke who conquered England, created an institution similar to the Sage Council called the Great Council. It is mainly composed of 2 major feudal lords, monks and laymen, and the direct vassals of the king, and it meets every 3 years to decide important events in the country. Due to the complex organization of the National People's Congress, and it is often impossible to hold it, just like our National People's Congress, there are too many people, so a small meeting, similar to the senior officials meeting, was constructed under the big meeting. The small meeting is the core body of the big meeting. It is composed of senior court ministers, such as the Chief of Royal Affairs and the Chief Security Officer, and integrates legislation, administration and justice. Also known as the Imperial Meeting. It is seen as the predecessor of the British Parliament in 1215. In order to resist the king's excessive taxation, the nobles launched an uprising and forced the king to sign the famous Magna Carta in British history. Its main purpose is to clarify the feudal rights of the king and nobles and prevent the king from violating these rights. From the 5th century to the 15th century, it seems that power has been shifting towards the direction of the parliament that restricts the power of the king, but the king still has practical decision-making power. Parliament is called only when the king needs it. For example, in the 24 years of Henry VIII's reign, Parliament was only convened 7 times, and in the 45 years of Elizabeth I's life, Parliament was only convened 10 times. It has completely become the asswiper of the royal power, used when needed, and discarded when not needed. Therefore, The Congress in the feudal era was generally a subsidiary institution of the feudal monarchy. Only when the capitalist mode of production eliminated the feudal mode of production could the Congress truly transform into a representative institution connected with assets, and since the collective suicide of nobles during the War of the Roses, the check and balance parliament composed of the King, the House of Lords, and the House of Commons has almost completely become a master-servant parliament dominated by the King. Of course, it is a joke to expect such a parliament to limit the kingship. The Tudor dynasty did not abolish the parliament. On the contrary, it also supported the parliament well, and regarded its support as a symbol of the public opinion of the Tudor royal family ruling England. Being able to get the support of the parliament puts the cloak of public opinion on the legitimacy of the Tudor royal family's royal rule, and greatly strengthens the Tudor dynasty's dominance over England. Edward's title of Lord of Wales and title of King of Ireland were all titles that Henry VIII added to himself under the guise of Parliament. Even the reason for Henry VIII's divorce was found by Parliament for him. Parliament has really become a loyal and obedient organization. This is also a proof that later generations agreed that the Tudor monarchy was unprecedentedly powerful in English history. As for why the Parliament was like a tame dog in the hands of the Tudor monarchs, but turned into a feral wolf in the hands of the Stuart monarchs, fighting against the Stuart monarchs everywhere. Some people will say that this is the result of Charles I's indiscriminate tax increase, but in fact Henry VIII did more excessively after the Reformation. Henry VIII used troops against France year after year, no matter how strong the background of copying Catholicism was. So he convened 5 consecutive parliaments to collect taxes to make up for financial losses. The main reason is that Charles I was too independent, and he did not discuss with the parliament when raising taxes habitually, and only went to the parliament when the money was not enough. Of course, the parliament would ignore him. At that time, the House of Commons had the right to levy taxes nationwide, while neither the King nor the House of Lords had this right. This was a rule established in the Middle Ages. Still a word, no comparison, no harm. In terms of tax collection, although the Tudor dynasty sometimes instructed local authorities to force loans to residents, those who refused and those who did not have enough loans were even summoned by the Privy Council. Used only occasionally in special cases. On the whole, the Tudors never imposed a national tax without Parliament. According to records, in 1496, the Senate, a government agency at the time, had decided to levy a tax of £120,000 without authorization, but it also announced that the decision could only take effect after the approval of the next Parliament. The apportionment of movable property taxes to the monks and laymen without the Parliament resulted in nothing but accusations of breaking the law and liberty. The monarchs of the Tudor dynasty often played with the Parliament and gave them the opportunity to participate. Although they had no decision-making power and had to agree to any bill, the members were still willing to be abused and happy. Moreover, the Tudor monarchs raised MPs like dogs, not only asking for them blindly, but also giving them a little sweetness. Because the members of the House of Commons are knights and citizens at the grassroots level, they do not have the same privileges as nobles. So the kings gave the parliamentarians some privileges to satisfy their desires. The king happily granted them the right to free speech, the immunity of parliamentarians, and the right to dispose of parliamentarians at their own discretion. And without these privileges, at least half of the members of the House of Commons would have to leave. The Duke of Somerset left the House of Lords dry-mouthed and was slowly coming to the House of Commons. Dear Your Excellency the Duke, welcome to the House of Commons. A fat gentleman in his 50s greeted Edward Seymour the moment he entered the House of Commons. He was very enthusiastic. The Duke of Somerset glanced at the gentleman in front of him, Richard Stroud, with a natural and cheerful smile on his face, which made people unconsciously develop a good impression of him. Dear Your Excellency the Duke, our speaker is ill and recuperating at home. Please don't blame him. Gentleman Richard was very polite to the new Lord Duke standing in front of him. Sir Moore's public heart really shames me. There is still a reason for blame, Your Excellency the Duke's tolerant heart. That really makes people feel like they are bathing in the sun. Haha. Mr. Gentleman's elegant manner also makes me admire. As they spoke, the two praised each other. Edward Seymour was still very friendly towards Richard Stroud, because during the period when Sir Thomas More was ill, he was almost the leader of the House of Commons, and he was very prestigious among some members. For example, the right to freedom of speech of congressmen was created because of him. In the Parliament in 1512, Richard Stroud was imprisoned by the judge of the tin mining court because he was young and ignorant, and recklessly wanted to introduce a bill on tin mines. As a result, the House of Commons insisted that the court be acquitted. Release him, but how can the court agree? The two are at a stalemate in the end. It was Henry VIII who made the decision to let Richard go, which created a precedent for the freedom of speech of parliamentarians. Thanks, best men, autumn industry falling, broken rails, Minhang Dream Talk, JWH Wenhu 2005, Prussian nobility, Isaiah, Yuri Yefimovich Shelov, Graffiti TTY, Kankastraku, I'm kidding, everyone votes support. Chapter 31 The Duke in the House of Commons. The Duke of Somerset followed Richard Strahler to the House of Commons Hall of the Palace of Westminster. Unlike the House of Lords, it was full of monotony and green, and the rows of seats were arranged in a mess. All kinds of people sat on it, and people whispered, and the whole hall seemed crowded. Seeing this, His Excellency the Duke couldn't help frowning, thinking back to the House of Lords. The House of Lords not only has a hall for parliamentary celebrations, a palace corridor for grand occasions, a room where the king wears formal dress to attend grand ceremonies, and a waiting hall where members exchange opinions and make some decisions. It fully embodies the elegance and nobility of the nobility. It has always been believed that in the English House of Commons the House of Commons, the word commons comes from the English word commoners, to understand the common people, reflecting that the members of the House of Commons are all of commoner origin, so as to distinguish the House of Lords, which is controlled by the nobles. However, there is no historical support behind this explanation. In fact, the word commons comes from the Norman French communes, which means the community represented by the members of Parliament, and has a geographical meaning. The Duke of Somerset walked to the speaking position under the leadership of Sir Richard, and then saw a scepter placed in the hall. This is the tradition of the House of Representatives. Whether it is in the House of Lords or the House of Commons, a scepter must be put on during the meeting. This is to demonstrate the importance of royal power and warn the members of the debate not to do anything out of line. Men and gentlemen, be quiet. Richard Strahler stood on the rostrum, stomped his cane, and made a thumping sound. Suddenly, the entire hall fell silent. Looking at the two people on the podium today, His Excellency the Duke of Somerset came to the House of Commons to explain his bill to us. Richard said in a hoarse voice, looking extraordinarily imposing in the large hall. Crack, crack, crack. There was thunderous applause from below, and it was unclear whether it was to welcome His Majesty the Duke or to respond to Mr. Richard's speech immediately. Gentleman Richard left the podium with clumsy steps, leaving His Excellency the Duke alone on the podium. Edward Seymour looked at hundreds of people in the audience. Among them were the earthier men, the shrewd merchants with Philistine faces, the handicraftsmen who patched clothes, and the local gentlemen and rude knights. In fact, His Excellency the Duke does not want to communicate with these lowly common people. It is just a tradition handed down from the time of Henry VIII. Legislative power must be exercised through Parliament in order to truly establish legal provisions that are common throughout the country. Dear members, His Excellency held his temper, slightly modified the content of the speech in the House of Lords, and delivered the speech to the members of the House of Commons. After the speech, there was a burst of applause as usual. After a while, His Excellency the Duke heard the noisy discussions below. Like a vegetable market, common people are common people. They don't have the quality and self-cultivation that nobles should have. It's really a shame to be with them. Sir Edward Seymour couldn't help but despise the many councillors in the audience, but the smile on his face remained, and he looked as good as ever. Elegant and unhurried after the speech, His Excellency the Duke turned around and left the hall of the House of Commons, heading for the House of Lords. At this time, the House of Lords had almost come out with its results. Sure enough, the Duke had just arrived at the House of Lords. The Speaker of the House of Lords, Baron Bradham, followed Duke Seymour and took out a document in his hand. Dear Your Excellency the Duke, the results of our discussion in the House of Lords have come out. The Baron had a serious face, especially wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses, which added a bit of majesty. Oh, really? I don't know what the result will be. The Duke of Somerset had a nervous look on his face, showing that he was very concerned about the result. In fact, Edward Seymour already had a guess in his mind as a result of the discussion of the nobles in the House of Lords. You must know that the 16 most powerful nobles and priests in England have already agreed. Among them are not only the leaders of the secular nobles except the king, but also the highest bishops in the entire Church of England. Therefore, His Excellency the Duke believes that there is no suspense in the matter, and it will definitely pass. Sure enough, Baron Bradham did not disappoint him, and showed him the unanimous results of the discussions between the nobles of the House of Lords and the senior priests. After enthusiastic discussions among members of Parliament, with 189 votes in favor, 35 against, and 7 abstentions, we unanimously passed a reform bill, Your Excellency the Duke. You can enact it and implement it. The Baron read the document solemnly, without any pause or delay. Edward Seymour's relatively old voice was so pleasant to hear, even though he already had the answer in his heart. The Duke still felt a surge of excitement in his heart, and a gentlemanly smile slowly appeared on his face. Thank you, Baron Adam. You are welcome. We are also for England. Yes, we are for England. His Excellency the Duke and Baron Adam smiled knowingly, and the atmosphere seemed so harmonious. The two walked happily to the inner room of the House of Lords, where the nobles and the king rested, and the decoration looked very luxurious. During the Tudor period, the House of Lords was significantly more powerful than the House of Commons in the later period of Henry VIII. Among the proposals of the House of Representatives, the House of Lords moved 183 bills, while the House of Commons only moved 127, crushing the House of Commons in number. And since most of the members of the House of Lords are local high-ranking people, for example, the Bishop of Buckinghamshire is a member of the House of Lords, so he has great influence on the low-level priests in Buckinghamshire, while the Earl in Manchester can influence the decisions of knights and gentlemen in Manchester. At that time, the House of Commons was mainly composed of these people. What about the bourgeoisie? They had almost no say in the House of Commons at that time. Even the blacksmiths who forged iron had more say than them. Therefore, during the Tudor dynasty, as long as the House of Lords moved and passed the proposal, the House of Commons would pass it. In all likelihood, the Duke of Somerset and Baron Adam are leisurely enjoying the tea from the Far East Empire, talking about life and ideals from time to time. And Our Majesty Edward VI is drinking tea and discussing ideals, but the one with him is not an elegant and noble baron, but a rude knight with muscles all over his body and a beard on his face. Of course, before that, we have to solve the problem of Princess Elizabeth. Thanks, XG Jason. There's nothing wrong with ignorance. Prussian nobleman, Hanbings IAE, Minhang Dream Talk, NRPHF5, Ranyan Yang, Book Friend 6XXXX48, Wretched, Greek letter Omega, Fanglin Hoi In Lay, everyone big vote support. Chapter 32 The Night in Number 039, S Audience. It is said that after Grenville left, the entire Windsor Manor became quiet again, and everyone in the manor performed their duties and were happily busy. And our Princess Elizabeth looks particularly listless in this early summer season. I saw her sitting at the foot of a big tree without any ladylike style. Knees, the beautiful head leaned on the elbow again, eyes staring blankly at the sky, and became dazed. Cute eyes, tender and exquisite nose, wide and rosy ears, together with flower buds that have just begun to take shape, and a pair of long legs that are just right in size. You are a cute and cute lolly. If you make her 20, those savage netizens of the first century saw it, so why not torture them to death? No, it can't go on like this anymore. Isn't a young girl the prime of youth? It should be alive and kicking, otherwise it will easily affect the development. Pooh. It should be affecting your health. Edward noticed Elizabeth's depression, and couldn't help worrying about her. As a younger brother, he felt obligated to make Elizabeth happy. But what was there to do to make Elizabeth happy? This question is worth thinking about for Edward. Without his comedy talent and sense of humor, otherwise he would not have gone to college without a girlfriend, huh? Did it mean that the Renaissance is popular at this time? It is recorded in the history books that a buddy who could write poetry became one of the three masters of the Renaissance. It can be seen that poetry was very popular at that time at all levels of society, especially those who had not yet touched society like Elizabeth. Noble lady, you will definitely like poetry. Thinking of such a cool all of a sudden, Edward couldn't help but praise himself in his heart. But what poem to read aloud? Ancient Chinese poems are not suitable, and I don't remember a few modern poems. What should I do? Edward just solved a problem, and then another problem popped up, and Edward's head is getting bigger. Huh? Isn't poetry a combination of poetry and song? Poetry is one without division. If it doesn't work, just come up with a song. Then I have too much time, quietly passing by, leaving behind a touching secret. How sweet. How beautiful. The infinite joy in my heart. Edward quietly came to Elizabeth, pretending not to see Elizabeth. Guzzi read aloud. Of course, you can't copy everything regardless. You have to learn from it, modify it, and then it becomes Edward's original. What? Plagiarism? No. 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 How can the matter of scholars be called plagiarism? We call this reference. Hey. Why is there someone reading poetry next to me? Who doesn't want to live, and dares to disturb me? A doubt arose in Elizabeth's heart. Elizabeth had prepared 100 ways to deal with this disturbing behavior torment him ever since Princess Elizabeth grew more and more beautiful. Countless suitors came to show her courtship every day, and Her Royal Highness tried her best to torture them in order to drive away these annoying followers, for example, digging holes on the road they follow, putting snakes with teeth pulled out on top of their heads, and other moves to make them retreat. Facts have proved that this method is very effective. In less than half a year, all the courteous young nobles disappeared, and Elizabeth played happily alone. However, the consequences of this are also obvious. There are legends of Princess Elizabeth being unruly and willful throughout England, and the fathers of the teenagers often complained to Henry VIII. Even after Edward's intercession, Elizabeth will still be punished by detention. And even more strict custom rules for her. Just as Elizabeth was about to teach this ignorant guy a lesson, she suddenly felt that it was the voice of her younger brother Edward. So, she held her temper, sat upright, and listened carefully to Edward's recitation. Gradually, Princess Elizabeth felt that the poems read by Edward had a lot of modified vocabulary, which made the poems extraordinarily beautiful. Compared with the current poems, it was almost the difference between adults and babies. By the time Edward finished reading the poem whose title he had forgotten, Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth was completely intoxicated by the poem. With an expression of enjoyment seeing Elizabeth being conquered by his own talent, Edward felt a sense of pride. Not to compare knowledge with a time traveler. After seeing Elizabeth's bewildered expression change, Edward walked away silently, giving her some time to relax. Edward can say with certainty that this invisible process of coercion did not embarrass the traversers or the Chinese people. Edward came to the wheat field again and watched the serf women fertilize the rye and barley, while the young and strong serfs shuttled back and forth between the field and the toilet, carrying farmyard manure on a pole made under Edward's instructions for the women. They water. At first the serfs came to resist this policy with a non-cooperative movement. But under the double blow of Butler Howard's whip, the serfs succumbed. In order not to dampen the enthusiasm of the serfs, Edward announced that the rye harvested this season would only be sold, and they would be fed the old grain from the previous year. That's how Edward saw the busy farming scene. Edward is very satisfied with the implementation of his orders. Commanding a small manor gives him a sense of accomplishment, so how does it feel to command a country? Edward couldn't help thinking about it. The desire in my heart to seize power 2 years later has strengthened again. Your Majesty the King. Your vassals know that you are playing in the manor, and the neighboring vassals rush to see you. Butler Howard interrupted Edward's imagination, and blocked Edward's throat with a sentence of swearing. This reason is very powerful. Because in the Middle Ages, the number of vassals determines your strength, and how to handle the relationship between vassals and yourself is also a compulsory course for medieval lords. Even in England, the power of the royal family is already very great, and the support of the vassals is not needed to strengthen the royal power, but only they are worthy of the trust of the Tudor royal family. Ordinary nobles cannot get the real trust of the royal family. To deal with ordinary nobles, the king needs very complicated procedures to plan, but to deal with the vassals, they only need a reasonable reason, and they can confiscate their land and fiefs, so that they can't survive or die. So, Edward went back to the room and asked Lucy to change herself into a gorgeous suit and wear ordinary uniforms to meet them, which would not give them a feeling that the king attached great importance to them. Under the leadership of Butler Howard, Edward came to the outside of the living room. The butler took a step ahead, stood at the door, and shouted into the inside, "By the grace of God, King of England, France and Ireland, Lord of Wales, Guardian of the Faith, Head of the Church of England and Ireland, His Majesty Edward VI arrives, thanks, the son of the lost land, Lancaster Coup, Book Friend 215 XXXX32, XG Jason. There's nothing wrong with ignorance. Let's be kidding, Dawn. 215 XXXX08, everyone's support. It is my greatest encouragement. Why are there only 2 tickets today? I'm so sad. But there is a big reward of Lily 599. Chapter 33 Interview. After hearing Butler Howard's call, the 3 knights who were talking in the living room turned around and stared at the door to see their new lord for the first time. I saw a young man less than 4 feet tall wearing a purple royal robe and a pair of wolf leather boots, walking in with a tight little face. His gestures were full of indescribable aristocratic elegance, which made him who had always longed to become a real noble. The 3 knights couldn't help feeling ashamed. Seeing Edward walking in, the 3 of them immediately took a step forward and knelt down on one leg forcefully. Suddenly, there was a booming sound in the hall, which showed that they still respected Edward. "My dear lord, your servant William Leonardo Bruno Smith Devereux Martin, come to meet His Majesty the King of England." The 3 knights greeted Edward together, and kissed one after another Edward's back. You may think that knights would kiss Edward's ring, but unfortunately, it was not popular for nobles to wear rings at that time, And the rings were not the family crests of nobles, only the bishops of the church would wear those rings. The rings worn by the bishops cannot be worn casually. There were also class distinctions in wearing rings in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, the popes had the supreme status and the greatest power, and they wore rings inlaid with huge gemstones. This kind of ring has a thick and solemn shape, representing the authority of the pope. In the 15th century, the rings worn by the popes were inlaid with gemstones at the top and decorated with lion reliefs with wings on both sides, showing a majestic and solemn style. Gold and silver rings inlaid with sapphire and amethyst are also a type often worn by bishops, because sapphire and amethyst symbolize the love and power of God, and also represent the bishop's unswerving focus on duty, mercy and forgiveness, and purity of heart and elegant. Some bishop rings are also engraved with the wearer's name. Also, at that time, etiquette did not allow kissing a lady's hand. If you do this, you will be considered an indecent person, and some traversers like to play like this the most. This is the rhythm of death. Only in the etiquette of the nobles meeting the king and queen, there is the etiquette of kissing hands. The nobles need to kneel on one knee, bow their heads and kiss the hands of the king and queen to express their respect. Under normal circumstances, only kings and nobles will kiss the ring when they see the cardinal, who is in charge of the country's religious affairs. They will bow and kiss the big gemstone ring worn by the bishop's left middle finger to indicate the bishop's identity. Every bishop has this ring, conferred by the Holy See. The three knights kissed the back of Edward's hand one by one, stood up directly, looked at Edward seriously, and waited for his speech, preparing to figure out what he meant. My dear knights, don't be nervous. It's rare for you to see me once, so it makes the atmosphere so uncoordinated. Edward spoke in a gentle tone, trying to make the three knights relax. Come on, let's sit down and talk. Come and taste the tea from the Far East Empire. It costs £100 to buy such a little. Hearing what the king said, the 3/10 knights slowly relaxed, and the skin on their faces relaxed a lot. The three of them carefully wiped off the non-existent sweat with their hands, and the sound of panting became much louder. To be honest, I don't blame them for being so cautious. The main reason is that the powerful royal power is like a man-eating tiger, so they can't help being so cautious. Even though Edward has not yet taken power, his power cannot be underestimated. For example, during the time of Henry VIII, his second wife was sentenced to death for treason by the irritable Henry VIII for saying that the king never won her heart. What's more, because the machismo, Henry VIII disliked his fifth wife Catherine because she was not a virgin when she got married. She was beheaded immediately on the second day of her marriage. Except for the wife, even if you think you are a nobleman, you will be exempt from this difficulty. I just want to say one thing, boy, you are still too naive. The Earl of Essex was convicted of treason for not telling Henry VIII that his fourth bride was ugly. The Countess of Salisbury was sentenced to death for her son's acceptance of a Roman cardinal. Even in the period of Elizabeth I, who was known as the Virgin Queen, the lovers and courtiers around the Queen were always living in the shadow of life danger, and a little inattentiveness would lead to suffering behind bars or even death. The Queen's lover, the Earl of Hertford, was declared illegal by the Queen for marrying without authorization and was fined £15,000. The Earl fled abroad, and his wife was imprisoned. When the Earl returned home, he was also imprisoned in the Tower of London. So, in 16th century England, the nobility at the top of society were less fortunate than their cousins on the continent. But for the king, it was infinitely better than its continental cousin. Edward looked at the burliest knight on the left, who looked like a bodybuilder. Your Majesty. That is Knight William Leonardo, the closest to our manor, only 20 miles away. He is a vigorous knight who likes to challenge others most. Recently he defeated Earl Boswell's son, Viscount Chabbs. Butler Howard introduced in a low voice, and these things are very dear to him. His ancestor was a mercenary. Because he captured 3 knights of the York family, he was knighted by His Majesty Henry VIII, and he was given a village about 1,000 acres in extent. Knight William, I heard that you recently defeated Viscount Chabbs. Your bravery is really enviable. According to the practice at that time, the heir of the Earl was usually called the Viscount, and the heir of the Duke was called the Marquess, and the Baron called it a knight. Haha. Even His Majesty the King has heard about this. What a joy. Knight William accepted the king's compliment without any embarrassment. With a proud look on his face, Edward looked at another unshaven knight. Your Majesty, that's Knight Bruno Smith, 30 miles away from us. Don't look at his brave face. In fact, his favorite thing is reading. Howard's voice sounded again at the right time. His ancestor was the clerk of His Majesty Henry VIII and owned a 900-acre manor. Bruno Knight, I heard that you like reading books. I have a book of ethics here, you can borrow it. Really? Thank you so much. A rough-looking old man actually likes to read books. Before Edward looked at the third knight, Howard's butler's voice sounded immediately, "Your Majesty." Knight Devereux Martin was originally a hereditary knight from the Lancaster family, and was transferred by His Majesty Henry VIII near Windsor Castle, so his family owns the largest manor among the three, a total of 1,500 more than 100 acres. Butler Howard's voice was full of envy. Knight Devereux likes to hunt, and he hunts almost once a month. Hearing what Butler Howard said, Edward looked at the knight with a little bit of a bad face, and he was also the youngest knight among the three, at most 20 years old thanks to Dachshund Dictionary. Prussian nobles, Lancaster coup, ice cheap, ignorance is not wrong, for the support of votes, especially the big rewards from the Prussian nobles. Chapter 34 Lease of the Manor. The little white-faced knight is the most special. His family not only has been loyal to the Lancaster family for a long time, but his loyalty can be guaranteed. Of course, there is no permanent loyalty, only permanent interests, but at present, the Martin family is relatively loyal to the Tudor royal family. Speaking of this, I have to mention Edward's grandfather, Henry VIII, is a branch of the Lancaster family, a small nobleman from Wales. The maternal ancestor of the Tudor family is John Beaufort. John Beaufort, the illegitimate son of John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, England, and his mistress Catherine Swynford in the 14th century, and the father of the Duke of Lancaster. It was King Edward III of England. Normally, an illegitimate child would have no claim to the throne, but the situation was complicated in 1396 when the Duke of Lancaster and Catherine officially married. When John Beaufort was 25 years old, both the Pope and the English Parliament issued separate proclamations the following year to retroactively recognize John Beaufort as a legitimate child of the Duke of Lancaster. The Duke of Lancaster's other legitimate son, King Henry IV, also recognized the status of John Beaufort's legitimate children, but declared that they had no right to inherit the throne. Princess Margaret Beaufort, John Beaufort's granddaughter and heir to the throne, married Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond. That is, the father of Henry VIII. While Henry Tudor was in exile in Brittany, his mother, the mother of Edward's grandfather, Princess Margaret Beaufort, remarried in England, lurking in England under the hostile York dynasty. Son's future plans. So when the Lancaster family became extinct, Henry VIII declared himself the heir to the throne of the Lancaster royal family. Eligible for succession to the throne of England, Henry VIII soon successfully landed in England, and defeated Richard III of the York family in the Battle of Bosworth Plain in 1485, and then proclaimed himself king as Henry VIII of England. And by marrying Richard III's niece, Princess Elizabeth of York, she quelled debate over the legality of her succession. The marriage between the hostile families ended the War of the Roses, and created a new dynasty with the offspring of the Lancastrian and Yorkist dynasties, and merged the red roses of Lancaster and the white roses of York. Group CD Tudor royal emblem, red and white Tudor rose. Let's take a look. John Lancaster, John Beaufort, Gerrit Beaufort, Edmund Tudor, Henry VIII, Henry VIII, Edward VI. This is more intuitive. It can be said that the Tudor family's ability to become the royal family of England is very much taken care of by Lady Luck. It can be said directly that the York family must be dissatisfied with the Tudor royal family, and after the Lancaster family died out, the Tudor royal family replaced the Lancaster family and became the object of loyalty of their knights. Cavalier Devereux, let me ask you. Edward saw that he was relatively young and had a close relationship with his family, so he used him to pry open the gap between the three of them. I don't know how much your family spends every year. Hearing Edward's question, Devereux's first reaction was that the foreign family, who often opposed him, asked someone to inquire about the secrets of their family. Prepare to give yourself a whack. However, he remembered that it was His Majesty Edward who came to ask him. It was impossible for him to be willing to be a spy, and even if he were, not many people could invite him. Dear Lord, your poor knight has to count every shilling every month to live. Speaking of expenses, Knight Devereux's eyebrows were already wrinkled into a hill, and his young face suddenly turned pale. Became a bitter gourd. The banquets and hunting costs almost every shilling I have in my pocket every month, and I have a knight's suit for my brother Pete, and my sisters pay for it every month. I want to buy those beautiful clothes that are popular in France. Even though Chevalier Devereux is a man, his nagging level is no less than that of those 50 or 60-year-old ants. Stop, my dear knight, I already know your situation. Don't say any more. Edward hastily stopped Devereux's long speech, and saved Bruno and William, who were already on the verge of collapse. And Butler Howard has already started to close his eyes and rest. Please ignore him. Faced with Edward's stop, Devereux closed his mouth tactfully, but seeing his unfinished expression, fortunately he stopped him. Otherwise there must be a long story behind. Edward couldn't help but patted his chest in rejoicing. Damn. He said such a long paragraph and still didn't say the specific number? He is not honest when facing the prince. It seems that no one who can become a knight is an idiot. Edward sighed in his heart, but fortunately there's Butler Howard. He is really a usable talent, Your Majesty. Knight Devereux spends almost £100 a month. This is my most conservative estimate. Butler Howard quietly came to Edward's side again, and said a word. Then he moved away from Edward for a certain distance, pretending that nothing happened, and stood there as a sentinel as if nothing had happened. Edward estimated the annual income of Knight Devereux. Assuming that the 1,500 acres of land are planted with grain, the annual income is at most £900, so how can he spend £1,200 of? Seemingly seeing Edward's doubts, the elusive butler has also come to Edward's side, explaining as if no one else was around since his father, the old Knight Devereux, the Martin family has sublet the manor to those merchants who smell like copper to raise sheep. It is estimated that it has been 18 years, and they will get £1,200 every year. What Howard said really shocked Edward unexpectedly. The current knights have already sublet the symbol of the knights, the fiefdom, and it will last for 18 years. If you think about it, you can live happily in London, a world of flamboyance. Who wants to stay in the countryside? Besides, you don't have to manage the manor, and you can get more money every year than you can earn from working hard. Why not? Why not? Edward didn't know that at that time, the Devereux Cavaliers were pretty good, just a year-by-year lease. There are also nobles who have been renting out for almost 100 years in 1999. The consequence of this is that when your family is not on the manor for a long time, the manor will gradually become his, and some of them are extinct from their own family, and your manor is theirs of. What's even more pitiful is that he met a prodigal son who spent all his savings and the manor was pawned. This is also a reason for the disintegration of the feudal economy and the rise of capitalism. So, what about Bruno Knight and William Knight? William Knight still manages it by himself, and Bruno Knight also sublets it. Edward didn't expect that the big boss William Knight, who was most likely to sublet, would manage it himself, while Bruno Knight, who likes to read, would sublet it out. Then Edward said something that surprised everyone. Then, Knights, I wonder if you are willing to sublease the manor to me. Thanks, Dream God, Yuri Yefimovich Shelov, Isaiah, Lily 599, are you kidding me? Book friend Juan, Shell, Zinghayu, Cheyenne Sword, ignorance is not wrong, Ling Fan, book friend 215 XXXX32, Zaya Abeo Knight, Chinkunkin, everyone's support is the biggest encouragement for me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Failed. What? Your Majesty, do you want to rent our manor? The jaws of the three knights almost dropped from shock. They opened their mouths wide and said loudly at the same time. Butler Howard on the side was no longer calm. His eyes almost popped out, with a puzzled expression on his face. He looked like a clown in a circus. Very funny. Yes. I want to rent your land, and I promise to offer you a satisfactory price. Edward said with a firm tone. The serious expression on the face of a 10-year-old boy looked very funny, but everyone present couldn't laugh at all. After all, he was the King of England at a young age. During the Tudor dynasty, no one knew how powerful the king was, and the three of William, as low-level nobles, knew the most. This. Your Majesty, this is an important matter. We have to go home and discuss it. The bearded Bruno Knight spoke first, and the remaining two also hurriedly nodded in response. Edward didn't want to be so slow and troublesome, so he opened his mouth and offered them an exciting price. I will give you £800 a year for Knight William's 800-acre manor. Edward looked at Knight William standing beside him, and said a price that made his heart flutter. And Bruno Knight, for your 900-acre manor, I can give you £900 per year. Bruno Knight on the side also received a shocking price, which made his heart beat faster. Edward also didn't let go of the instigator, who stayed quietly aside. Knight Devereux, facing him, set a higher price than his current rent. Knight, for your 1,500-acre manor, the price I give you every year is £300 higher than your current price. I can give you £1,500 a year. In order to give them firm confidence, Edward did not hesitate to offer a price far exceeding the market price. Faced with such a temptation, the three knights looked at me and I looked at you. none of them intending to be the first birds. Seeing this, Edward knew that the meeting had failed, but he was not discouraged and relaxed. I had a pleasant conversation with the three knights about anecdotes from all over England, but Edward mainly played the role of listening. Then Edward invited them to luncheon, showing the country bumpkins the luxury of the royal family at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Butler Howard personally sent them out, while Edward only bid them a friendly farewell. The three knights belched contentedly, rode on the big horse, and under the careful escort of the attendants, they embarked on the way home. Boom, boom, boom. Edward was lying on the seat, and Lucy was massaging his shoulders with her delicate hands, catering to Edward's questions from time to time. A sudden knock on the door interrupted his interest. "Your Majesty." "It's me. Howard Charles." The butler Howard's voice rang out in time, holding back Edward's foul words, which caused the little maid Lucy to smile coquettishly. "Come in," Edward said helplessly, as if he had nothing to do with Howard. Butler Howard saluted Edward, then turned his head and looked at Lucy without speaking. Knowing what he meant, Edward nodded to Lucy, and Lucy left the study in a sensible way, and closed the door before leaving. "Your Majesty, as your retainer, I have to dissuade you from your foolish thoughts," Howard said to Edward with a serious face, like a soldier who is about to die heroically, with a hint of sadness in his tone. "Mr. Steward, are you talking about the renting of the Knight's Manor I proposed this morning?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "This is a terrible decision," Howard said in an affirmative tone, keeping his eyes on Edward. "Oh, my Lord Butler, this is just my whim," Edward argued. "Besides, they didn't agree. Your Majesty, your thinking is wrong. And those nobles will think that the royal family is going to confiscate the fiefs of their vassals, so the royal vassals will definitely be uneasy, which will damage the majesty of the royal family." Butler Howard preached for a while, making Edward stunned for a while. Even if he was killed, he would never have imagined that a momentary idea would have such a consequence. Fortunately, it failed in the end. Although Edward knew in his heart that he was wrong, he refused to admit defeat. "Okay, sir, I already know, there's no need to say any more," Edward's complaining voice sounded, directly interrupting Butler Howard's long-winded words. "Also, my housekeeper, you didn't come here just to teach me a lesson, did you?" "How is it possible? How dare I teach His Majesty the King a lesson?" Howard said he didn't dare, but the tone of his speech didn't sound like it then. "Butler Howard, what exactly are you here for?" Edward's tone became a little stiff. "Your Majesty, I'm here to ask. We've finished watering all the land. What should we do next?" "It is very opinionated that my uses farmyard manure." Edward was not disappointed when he heard Howard circled over. How could a shrewd person like him be frightened? Speaking of farmyard manure, it was not easy for Edward to produce it. First of all, Edward built a toilet in the manor, stipulating that all people must defecate in the toilet and are not allowed to defecate anywhere. Many people think that in normal times, people's urination and defecation can directly water plants, but this is actually wrong. The main reason is that human feces contain germs and insect eggs. Only after they are fermented and decomposed, most of them are killed, reducing the number of germs. And if it is watered directly without fermenting and decomposing, the plants are likely to be rotted and burned to death. Therefore, Edward can be used after several days of storage, and the storage time should not be too long. Generally, it will be decomposed in 6 to 7 days in summer and 15 to 20 days in winter. It should be applied as soon as possible after fermentation to avoid loss of fertilizer. In the ancient era, when there was no fertilizer, using farmyard manure was a frugal and convenient way to obtain materials everywhere, and the effect was not bad. The nutrients contained in farmyard manure are relatively comprehensive, and the fertilizer effect is stable and long-lasting. In addition to the three major nutrients of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, farm fertilizer also contains calcium, magnesium, sulfur, iron and various trace elements, as well as some substances that can stimulate root growth and various beneficial soil microorganisms. Howard, call some people to prepare to cut some weeds. Edward ordered, bring more people, and get them here as much as possible. Yes, Your Majesty. Although Howard looked confused, he had no choice but to follow through on the previous agreement. Everyone guessed it right. Edward is ready to get plant ash to fertilize the field thanks to the heart is as bright as summer flowers. Minhang Menghua, Hanbing Ziae, Daming Shami, King San Wu Wu, XG Jason, JJC 1221, Orange C, Prussian nobleman. Let's joke. Thank you for your great support, especially the big rewards from Orange C. Today's votes are also less, Alice. I don't know when the collection will reach 1,000. Boil slowly. Anyway, thank you for your support. Chapter 36 The Fear of the Whip. As a kind of fertilizer that is widely used in rural areas, plant ash is not only cheap and easy to use, but also very easy to get. As long as you are not a lazy person in the countryside, almost every household will have it. Plant ash is the ashes formed after burning firewood. It is a quick-acting potassium fertilizer with a loose texture. It generally contains 5% to 15% of available potassium, and also contains calcium, magnesium, sulfur, phosphorus, and iron. Plant ash is mainly used as potassium fertilizer in agricultural production. It also has various functions such as cold protection, sterilization, inhibition of pests and diseases, promotion of strong crop stems, and enhancement of crop stress resistance. Of course, this is one of the few fertilization methods that Edward knows. This is what Edward knew when he was working with his grandparents when he was a child. After he was in school, he never did farm work again. As soon as Edward thought of the ash, he thought of his family members far away, and his mood began to sink. Howard, seeing His Majesty the King, consciously left the study, leaving Edward alone in the study with his head bowed and meditating. Howard left the study and went straight to Lucy and Luna's house. Looking at the dilapidated mud house and the dirt road rotted by the rain, he avoided the urge to knock on the door. "Old Jack, come out!" Howard shouted with all his strength, but unfortunately his voice was not loud and no one heard him. "After all, I am used to being pampered, and my body is weak, so the sound I make is relatively small. Old Jack! Old Jack! Old Jack!" Howard held back his gentlemanly self-cultivation and shouted like a commoner, which made the frail butler almost collapse in his heart. Little Jack, who was eating at this time, heard some vague calls with keen ears, as if calling his father, and the voice seemed to be from Butler Howard. "Father, someone is calling you outside the door." As if he knew that he might be scolded for disturbing his father's meal, he added, "It seems that the housekeeper is calling you." Old Jack, who was eating, expressed anger at his son's behavior of interrupting his meal, but when he heard the respected butler calling him, he quickly lost his job and ran out in a hurry. The wife, who was also eating at the side, knew the importance of the matter, and put away the leftover bread he had eaten, and prepared to leave it for him to eat when he came back. Butler Howard felt that his throat was almost hoarse, and there was still no movement in the dilapidated house, as if the words he shouted did not exist at this time. The housekeeper regretted it in his heart. He just wanted to show his respect to Old Jack, to be precise, to show his respect to sisters Luna. Just at this time, Old Jack opened the poor wooden door to ease the embarrassment of Butler Howard. This is also a sacrifice to maintain a gentleman's demeanor. Seeing that Old Jack finally came out, Butler Howard breathed a sigh of relief, took out a white handkerchief from his pocket, wiped his forehead carefully, and regained his composure. "Look, that gentleman Howard is back, Master Steward. How can I bother you to come here in person? Old Jack has been a supervisor for several months, and he is no longer that stupid serf who only knows how to work." "What orders?" Howard nodded non-committally, did not answer Old Jack's question, and gave orders directly. "Old Jack, you gather everyone now, whether they are men or women, as long as they can walk, gather them for me. You don't need to do any heavy work, just let you collect weeds for our King Edward, the more the better." Howard knew what Old Jack was going to ask, so he said it first. He didn't want to stay in this filthy place for too long time. "Okay. That's it, go get busy." Howard couldn't stay any longer, and hurriedly evacuated, not forgetting to remind Old Jack. Old Jack couldn't understand the delicate problems of those grown-ups. Wasn't it just some mud and excrement? What, excrement? Damn it. Old Jack couldn't help cursing when he saw the yellow-brown thing on the sole of his straw sandals, and he couldn't help becoming irritable. "Oh, God damn, Jack, didn't I tell you to stay away from home before pulling? I think you deserve a beating again." Old Jack yelled at Jack, who was eating in the house, and then rubbed on the weeds, trying to wipe it clean. Jack, who was eating, buried his head in the black bread soaked in water, without saying a word. The mother next to him just smiled and stroked little Jack's head without saying a word. Little Lammy saw his brother being scolded, so he couldn't help but go over and grab his hand to comfort him. "Hey, Sean, call your family who can run, and gather at the drying yard. Hal, bring your family who can run, and gather at the drying yard." Old Jack used the artificial system to shout from house to house, because they were not far away, and in less than 10 minutes, 23 serf families had gathered at the grain drying ground. Old Jack stood in the middle of the drying yard, surrounded by his neighbors, who looked at him respectfully, including his two little fellows and his wife. "Everyone, our lords, His Majesty Edward ordered us to collect weeds for him, the more the better. This is our honor. We should use all our strength to complete the task. Old Jack's words were full of resolute. If anyone is lazy, don't blame me for whipping him with a whip. As he spoke, he flicked the leather whip in his hand, which was often used by Butler Howard to punish disobedient serfs. Of course, this group of serfs have lived in the manor for generations, and the disobedient ones have already been destroyed by humanity, and the obedient ones left behind are all obedient. This whip has not been used in almost 10 years, but its deterrent effect is still quite sufficient. Seeing this leather whip, the people around couldn't help but think of the horror of the leather whip they had heard from their parents. They nodded in unison, showing fearful expressions. Little Jack knew that his father would not whip him with a leather whip, but he was still afraid deep in his heart. Hey, Jack, do you remember our secret base? Of course I do, we often go to play. Jack was baffled by his little friend Mir's question, and he didn't know why he asked the question knowingly. Hey, don't you notice that there are many long weeds there? What are they called? Reeds. It seems to be called reed. After Mir's reminder, Jack remembered that there were many reeds near his and Mir's small basin. This way, the two of us can go there to play for a while, and then we can move a lot of reeds away, and your father won't find out. Mir whispered furtively in Jack's ear, with an expression on his face unspeakably happy. That's it. I'll take Lemmy, and you take your sister Wayna. Okay, but keep them secret. Of course. Jack promised very readily. You can play. Jack immediately forgot how powerful the whip is thanks to the wretched, Cheyenne sword. For your support, this is a big reward for Orange C. Chapter 37 Letter from London. Not to mention the happy experience of the two little guys Jack and Mill. When it was dark, the people of the whole manor were mobilized and gathered on the drying ground, watching the weeds piled up like a mountain. How to describe it? The whole grassy hill is about 10 feet high, more than 3 meters high, and the diameter of the base is about 50 feet. It looks like a little giant sitting on the ground, and it is still a green giant, full of various plants, weeds, tree roots, wildflowers. These form a huge green oil painting, which is already an eye-opener for serfs who have little knowledge. In fact, for the well-to-do Butler Howard, this green mountain is only seen in his life, enough for him to brag about it in front of other low-ranking nobles. For a long time when Edward came, there was still a trace of shock on Butler Howard's face. Apparently, he has only truly understood the argument of strength in numbers today. Edward looked at the green mountain in front of him, then at the crowd looking around, and threw a torch towards the green mountain without blinking his eyes. The torch walked along a parabolic direction into the mountain that never came back. In an instant, the torch infected a green grass mass, turning it into a warm red, and then, like a race, the red paint traveled all over the green mountain, turning the green mountain into a red mountain. Boom. The entire grassy mountain has become an erupting volcano, very imposing. Oh, God, God, God. At this moment, even though Butler Howard, who had been restrained, opened his mouth, swallowed desperately, and kept calling God, old man. The serfs on the side looked like they had just seen God. Their eyes were reddened by the fire, but they didn't move a bit, while the children hid behind the adults and covered their eyes. Edward watched with great interest how the entire volcano went from burning to extinguishing. As if watching a dizzying performance, the whole person felt that his soul had been sublimated. Hey, my dear Mr. Butler, the show is over, it's time to wake up. Edward patted Butler Howard on the shoulder and said in a teasing tone, Yes, Your Majesty, your aristocratic demeanor is really worth learning. Butler Howard had just returned to normal, and he couldn't speak very clearly, and he still didn't forget to flatter Edward. In fact, Edward just likes courtiers like Howard, who can not only flatter, but also do things. As for the direct minister who could blow up Li Shimon's anger like Wei Jing in the Tang dynasty, Edward still respected him at a distance, and he wanted to live a few more years. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the burning plant ash had been completely extinguished, and the serfs who had been spectators for a while had also calmed down. As for those who were not psychologically qualified, Edward didn't bother to pay attention to them. Hey, everyone, the time has come for you. Edward pointed to the ashes that had turned gray after burning, and said to the serfs, You just need to pack them up and dig a hole to use as a container. Hurry up and go to work. What are you doing? Old Jack reacted instantly, commanding many serfs, cursing from time to time. Edward was very satisfied with old Jack's performance, and nodded at him. Suddenly, old Jack seemed to have taken a stimulant. His face instantly became rosy, and his curse became more vigorous. Howard didn't respond to the fact that old Jack had robbed him of his job. He followed Edward, bent slightly, and accompanied Edward back to the villa the next day. Edward personally commanded the serfs to open up wasteland. That's right. It is land reclamation. The entire Windsor Manor covers an area of about 20,000 acres. Except for some cultivated fields, mountains and rivers, there are nearly 8,000 acres of wilderness that can be used as arable land. And why didn't Howard open it up? The first reason is because of the backwardness of production tools. It is no exaggeration to say that throughout the 11th and 12th centuries, European serfs could only use their own hands to cultivate the land. In the 15th century, serfs at this time could use wooden plows and wooden hoes to plow the land, but if you want to use them to open up wasteland, then you must be prepared for poor harvests in the wheat fields. Basically, one person can reclaim 1 acre of land every month, and the new land at that time has not been cultivated for 5 or 6 years, so there will be no harvest. In the turbulent Middle Ages, there is no peaceful day for you to open up wasteland. In the period of the Tudor royal family, after the baptism of the War of the Roses and the Reformation, the land was completely sufficient. It was only when the population erupted in the later period of Henry VIII and the development of the enclosure movement that the farmers were encouraged to open up wasteland and plant land. The second point is the scarcity of population, to be precise, the scarcity of adult labor force, resulting in the lack of sufficient labor force to open up wasteland on a large scale. But the labor force is scarce, and the production tools are simple. How do you let them open up wasteland? Another point is that the population demand is small, and the population explosion period has not yet reached, and the gentlemen have no desire to open up wasteland. Therefore, Edward released a big move, only compared with the previous plows. Plow is a masterpiece of ancient Chinese farming technology, so Edward instructed the carpenter among the serfs to change the light shaft at this time into a curved shaft and a short shaft, and install a freely rotating plow disc on the shaft head, which not only makes the plow frame smaller and lighter, but also facilitates turning around and turning. Flexible operation, saving manpower and animal power. The second is to add plow review and plow construction. Pushing the plow review can make the arrow of the plow go down, and the plowshare will go deep into the soil. If you lift the plow, make the plow arrow upward, and the plowshare will enter the soil shallowly. However, if the plow commentary, plow arrow and plow construction of only are used in an organic combination, it can meet the different requirements of deep or shallow plowing, and can standardize the adjustment of the depth of cultivated land, which is convenient for intensive cultivation. The plow wall can not only break up the soil, but also push the plowed soil to one side, reducing the resistance of the plow to advance. In England, where the soil is wet and sticky, this kind of plow is most suitable. After all, it was invented in the ancient Jiangnan water town, and it is very similar to the land of England. In just one day, the whole manor had 5 sets of plows. I believe that this summer, the whole manor will have 5,000 acres of land. Edward, who was tired all day, was just lying on the chair reading a book, when Lucy suddenly ran over and asked the dark blade to see him. Edward looked at the little guy in front of him suspiciously. He was wearing an old sackcloth with gaps in the cuffs. His whole body looked weaker than Edward's. He said he was a little guy, but he was actually a 13-year-old boy. After seeing Edward, he knelt down and presented a sealed letter. When Edward saw this seal, he knew it was from Guy at London. Lucy, prepare a delicious dinner for this hard-working little guy, and reward him. Edward could not open and read the envelope in front of everyone, so he let Lucy leave with the little guy delivering the letter. Thanks, book friend 7XXXX25, Tachuan Dictionary, Lancaster Q, NGCASD, are you kidding? You are so slow to update. 56-legged Mayoj, Orange C, Peter, fans, King Jmiao Mulans How, everyone's support. Everyone, try to recommend the top 2,000, this goal is not high. I hope you will support us a lot. Chapter 38 Marriage Invitation. After the two left, Edward couldn't wait to open the letter. I saw it written above, Your Majesty the King. Please forgive me for taking so long to write to you. Since you left Windsor Castle, there have been waves in London. It was not until late at night that Guy had time to write a letter to his lord. Spreading out the newly bought white paper and quill pen, Guy sat on the chair and wrote silently by the small oil lamp he bought yesterday. The Duke of Somerset discussed with the ministers of the Regency Council and passed the decision to expand the reform. After that, His Excellency the Duke gave full play to his eloquence and gave a lobbying speech in the House of Lords first. Of course, even if the Duke is dumb, I think the House of Lords will pass his bill. Members will not try the power of kingship. Gay's writing is full of ridicule for those nobles. Even as once a member of the gentlemen, he was not stingy with ridiculing them, and his strength was far greater than that of the nobles. How can the entourage of the House of Commons resist the decision of the noble lord of the House of Lords? Even though they pretended to be negotiating, they spent a long time discussing, trying to prove that they represent the interests of the majority of the people of England. Gay's ridicule was so sharp that he directly lifted the veil of the Parliament. In fact, on the contrary, they enjoy the privileges of being MPs and agree with the decision of the House of Lords. The House of Lords spent half an hour voting, while the House of Commons spent an afternoon discussing. In fact, the decisions of the two are exactly the same. Guy found that his letter was full of views on the members of Congress with personal factors. After thinking about it, Guy decided not to make any amendments. The rights of His Majesty the King no longer need to be guaranteed by Congress, and a strong royal power is the foundation of England's strength. Seeing this, Edward couldn't help but feel very relieved. Finally, he saw a supporter of royal power. At the end of the Middle Ages, the era of royal power is coming, and all things that prevent it from becoming stronger will eventually be destroyed. Thinking of this, Edward couldn't help but suddenly became more willing to reform the Parliament. He didn't want to be the trash of Charles I. Edward continued to read. So far, the Duke of Somerset has abolished the treason law, heretic law, and 6 articles of faith established by the previous king have all been abolished. In fact, Edward already knew his uncle's determination to repeal the 3 statutes on the night before going to Windsor Manor. The whole castle was full of noise. The servants and maids have been in Windsor Castle for a long time. Unlike Henry VIII, Edward likes to wander around all year. He likes to be a quiet and handsome man, so when Edward announced that he was moving to Windsor Manor, the maids hurriedly packed the travel packages, the male servants prepared the tools for the trip, and prepared saddles and horse food for the horses. Edward let them prepare. As a king, he just needs to read quietly. Your Majesty the King. The Duke of Somerset, please see me. Lucy whispered after saluting Edward. After Edward closed the book, he nodded slightly, and Lucy went out to bring the Duke of Somerset in. My dear uncle, I haven't seen you for a few days. You look even more radiant and charming. Edward took the initiative to greet the Duke when he saw the Duke coming in. Oh, my little Edward, how is your physical condition? His Excellency the Duke was concerned about Edward's body with an affectionate look. It's okay. My body is getting better and better, and your concern has made me feel better. Edward joked. Haha. Little Edward, you are getting more and more humorous. The Duke laughed. I don't know what's the matter with you coming to my place, uncle? Edward asked the Duke of Somerset with a simple face, which seemed to fit the characteristics that a child should have. Edward, I came here for the future of England. Speak, my dear uncle. Edward lay on the chair with an indifferent face, without the posture of a king. The enthusiasm at the beginning is gone. I think some decrees of the former king need to be improved, so that the true glory of God can shine on England. His Excellency the Duke seemed to have gotten used to Edward's lazy look, and he still said without changing his face. For example? Edward asked lazily, looking like he needed a beating. For example, like the treason law, heretic law, and 6 tenets law, etc. Although the Duke was surprised by Edward's unreasonable playing of cards, he still reacted to his self-cultivation as an old-fashioned politician. Yes. You can dispose of them as you like. Edward heard this, and immediately straightened his sitting posture, and became serious. In fact, at present, Edward's uncle, the Duke of Seymour's reforms are still in line with Edward's interests. The gradual development of religious reforms complements the strength of the Tudor kingship. It was not until the later period of Elizabeth I that the power of the capitalists continued to grow, and the religious reform was reduced to a tool for them to seek political needs. After Edward agreed to this matter, the two started a happy relative banquet together. That night, the guests and the host broke up the banquet happily, and both of them got a release of their acting skills. In fact, Duke Seymour not only got Edward's permission, but also got Edward's promise that he would always support his reforms, saving him a lot of time. Edward came back to his senses, and then read the letter written by Captain Guy. And the task you entrusted to me to take in orphans has almost been completed. There are no more orphans in London, and we took in a total of 1,568 people, 660 girls and 908 boys. Among them, there are 1,130 people under the age of 10, and 438 people between the ages of 10 and 14. Thanks to God's blessing, and your Majesty's support, we have recruited 31 down-and-out gentlemen to join us. Of course, I still want to listen to your instructions this time. How will you deal with these children? They've almost run out of food from Windsor Castle, and it's only enough for them for a week now. Yours truly, Guy Ham. Edward seemed to see his helplessness and complaints about those orphans from the letter. Edward could only ask Windsor Manor to send 3,000 bushels of rye, which was equivalent to 219,000 caddies of rye, enough for more than 1,000 people. Open your stomach and eat the first half of the year. After reading this, Edward stretched his waist greatly. He was exhausted. He looked up at the big clock. The hour hand had already pointed to 8 o'clock, and an hour and a half had passed. Your Majesty, Queen Catherine has sent you an invitation letter. Lucy's crisp voice sounded. Bring it. Edward said helplessly when he heard the letter from Queen Catherine. What? A wedding invitation. Edward opened it, and suddenly let out a voice in surprise. Thanks, Lancaster coup, rest assured, 2 copies, Hanbing's IE, Prussian nobleman, IP 001735, Orange C, book friend 1,815,162,023, Macy proudly, Juan book friend 6XXXX48, Jiang Gying, book friend 1,459,948,794, book friend 3,128XXXX47, just kidding, especially thanks to the Prussian nobles for their big rewards. There is another update tonight, Alice. I updated it with tears in my eyes. Can you not let me play for a while? My sister was destroyed by you just like that. Chapter 39 Cattle Farming beginning in England. My dear Majesty Edward, I am about to marry your uncle, Baron Thomas Seymour, on May 3rd, and I hope you will come to Sudeley Castle in Gloucestershire to attend our wedding. Love you, Catherine Pal. When Edward read this letter, he felt mixed feelings. Even though he had expected it in his heart, he still felt uncomfortable. It's like your father married you a stepmother, but after your father died, your stepmother married your uncle, which made Edward a little embarrassed. Thomas Seymour was Edward's uncle and son of Sir John Seymour. Also Edward's mother, Queen Jane Seymour, and younger brother of Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset. With the help of Queen Seymour, Thomas Seymour also successfully served as the commander of the English Channel Fleet in 1544. After Edward ascended the throne, in order to thank Queen Seymour for her upbringing, he was made a baron. Seeing that he had been in the Navy, Edward discussed with Duke Seymour, and then he was appointed Lord of the Navy again, and he was also admitted to the Privy Council. In fact, Edward estimated that his second uncle married Queen Catherine not only because of the resurgence of old love, but also because of her huge dowry. At the age of 17 she was married to Edward Barrow, 2nd Baron Barrow of Gainsborough. Edward died in the spring of 1532. In 1534 she married John Neville, 3rd Baron Latimer of Snape, North Yorkshire. John Neville died in 1543. If you think about the inheritance of the two nobles, plus the accumulation of her years of being queen, it is conservatively estimated that there is at least a dowry of £30,000 in the home of Henry VIII in Aragon. Catherine's daughter Princess Mary, later Mary I, Catherine Parr, attracted the attention of the king. After the death of her second husband, the wealthy widow developed an affair with Thomas Seymour, 1st Baron Seymour of Sudeley, brother of Queen Jane Seymour. But the king liked her very much, so she had to accept the king's love and marry Henry VIII. In fact, marrying rich widows was a very popular way of development among nobles. This behavior of Thomas Seymour will not only not be ridiculed by people, but will even make the nobles envy and hate. In the late Middle Ages, there were frequent wars, and many noblemen died on the battlefield. In addition, the average life expectancy of people at that time was short, resulting in frequent succession and handover of feudal territories, and the number of heiresses increased greatly. According to the custom, if a noble family has only one legal daughter, she can inherit the family property and title alone. If there are more daughters, one person will inherit the title, but the family property will be divided equally. Those who have no legal children return the land to the monarch or lord. For nobles who have always valued property and family status, the estate of an heiress or widow is more attractive than emotion and beauty. The most typical one is the 20-year-old cousin of Henry IV. In order to obtain the title and fief, he even held a wedding with a nearly 80-year-old duchess, which made people laugh and cry. Edward is not optimistic about this marriage. A marriage based on money is destined to be unhappy. Today is April 28, 1547, and they got married on May 3rd. Hey, the time is wrong. Edward remembered that they seemed to get married 6 months after the death of Henry VIII in history. Why was it earlier? Is this the butterfly effect? After Edward understood it in detail, he calculated a common result in time travel novels, the butterfly effect. It doesn't matter, when it's time to come, it will always come. Edward shook his head, covered himself with a quilt, and fell asleep soundly. The next day, Edward had just finished his breakfast, and rushed to the wasteland without stopping, where the routine land reclamation work was in full swing when Edward arrived. The whole wilderness had been ignited. The burning weeds, thorns, dead branches and fallen leaves on the wasteland danced quickly in the flames. They would be the first batch of fertilizer for this land afterwards. The serfs tied the quid and plow they made yesterday to the shoulders of the heavy-drawn horses. They formed groups of two, with one holding the rein and the other holding the plow, and slowly started the road of reclamation. Today is the day when the manor expands and expands. Butler Howard has already arrived and is supervising the work of the serfs. In fact, there is nothing to supervise, because old Jack is helping. Seeing this, Edward couldn't help but ask Howard beside him, "My dear Mr. Steward, why don't you use cattle to open up wasteland? Your Majesty, you don't know that cows are not easy to tame, especially bulls. To let them cultivate the land well is no less than to let the barbarians in the north learn manners." Butler Howard came up with a vivid metaphor. "It shows that the bull is stubborn and difficult to train. The barbarians of the north refer to the Scots in the north of England. At that time, because England was often at war with the Scots, it was a derogatory term for the Scots. Horse farming was used on a large scale in Europe after the 12th century. In fact, raising horses costs more than raising cattle. The views of agronomists in the 13th century were, horses eat more oats, horses have nails, and cattle do not need these. Therefore, the cost of raising horses is 4 times higher than that of cattle. Moreover, cattle are more docile and old. Sell a butcher to eat beef, but horses can only be sold for skins, and even for a period of time, horses were not allowed to be slaughtered. Therefore, the value of horses is more expensive, while the preservation of cattle is higher. In addition, the origin of the profession of beamwine of Monkey King is also related to raising horses. Everyone knows that a horse is a delicate animal, and it is more likely to get sick. According to the agricultural books of our country, it is a measure to prevent a monkey from getting sick by tethering a monkey in a stable. That's why Mr. Wu Chenjin gave monkey-headed Monkey King the official title of beamwine. But the advantages of horses are also very prominent. First of all, it has a wide range of uses, including camel riding, pulling, and civilian and military use. In speed and conspicuous pastimes, the horse also has a great advantage over the ox. The speed is the specialty of the horse. In the 16th century, French farmers highly praised horse farming. The work done by a horse in a day is 3 times or even 4 times that of a cow. For farmers, plowing the land quickly is of course a good thing, but for a manor owner like Edward, the cost of raising horses is definitely higher than raising cattle. And raising horses is not cost-effective. But the conclusion that horse farming is faster than cattle farming, in different societies, the answer is not exactly the same. Cultivating land is a collaborative labor between humans and animals, and the ultimate efficiency is the result of the joint efforts of the two, which cannot be determined solely by horses or humans. In the 1950s, the Soviet writer Yelin said in the story of the 5-year plan, "The horse is the most gluttonous and greedy of all machines. It will chew up half of the farmer's fields." In the Ukrainian grasslands, farmers it costs 50 guineas a year for his horses, as much as he spends on his whole family. So Edward gave them another trick to subdue the bull, piercing the bull's nose. "Thank you for the great support of the Prussian nobles, and thank you for the reward yesterday. This is an update for you." Chapter 40. After finishing these tasks, Edward handed over all the matters of reclaiming the wasteland to Butler Howard, which was his job anyway. Edward set off for Sudeley Castle in Gloucestershire, with 20 knights, and the sisters Lucy and Luna. And, of course, there's the goofy little Arthur White Horse. In fact, when Edward went there, Queen Catherine and Thomas Seymour were already engaged and legally married a month ago. On March 20th, the sun in the sky was very soft, and Catherine and Baron Seymour came to the church in Fort Sudeley with anxiety. As soon as she got off the carriage, she unconsciously took Thomas' hand and held it tightly. "You know, she has been married 3 times, and this is the 4th time, and she is engaged to a baron in the church as the king's queen." At the request of Catherine Parr, Thomas did not invite too many people to their engagement ceremony, only his elder brother, the Duke and Duchess of Somerset, and Catherine's younger brother, the Duke of Parr. At this time, under the door of the church, the priest of the church had already been greeted by the porch wearing a sash and a white cassock. The cassock worn by the priest is exquisite, and white represents purity and cleanliness. After entering the church, the clergy of the church will verify the identity of the 2 people who are going to be engaged, record their specific personal information, and then ask them some questions to reconfirm that the 2 are voluntarily married. This is a young man who seems to have seen Queen Catherine, and was still a little surprised by her arrival. He stroked his chest with his hand to calm down, then asked in an unhurried tone, "Miss Catherine Parr, if the Holy Church agrees, will you swear to marry Baron Thomas Seymour?" Catherine replied calmly, "I promise then, Baron Thomas Seymour, if the Holy Church agrees, will you swear to marry Miss Catherine Parr?" "I am willing." Baron Seymour's voice was very affirmative and resonant. When it is confirmed that the will of the two to get married is not wavering, the clergy will bless the two of them in Latin and say, "I am engaged for you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen." After the blessing, the betrothed couple will exchange rings. Lord Seymour took the ring off his finger, put it on Catherine's hand and said, "Mom, by this gold ring you will know that I am yours, my everlasting love." Correspondingly, Catherine he also took off the ring from his finger and put it on Baron Seymour's hand in the same tone. The holding of the engagement ceremony is not simply announcing to others that I want to marry you as a wife. It represents a kind of right, the loyalty and protection of both parties to each other. The engagement agreement is legally binding, not can be stopped. It will the two people who are engaged do not register at the marriage registry as they do today, but at the clergy of the local church. The church at that time indeed played a role similar to government agencies in this respect. The clergy not only served as witnesses witnessing the marriage in reality, but also represented God's blessings. On the other hand, since the two have made a vow before God, they will not easily violate their original promise in later life. The church has always been the witness and defender of the marriage vow in the Middle Ages. What's even more frustrating is that once such an engagement ceremony is completed, it does not mean that the two can get married immediately. This kind of engagement is actually only the first guarantee of marriage. So what is the second guarantee? That is the 40-day wedding notice period after the engagement. The number of 40 days has a special meaning and is also a symbol in the Christian church. Jesus once endured the temptation of the devil for 40 days in the wilderness. Therefore, to extend this meaning means that people should imitate Jesus and endure the 40-day test. During the 40-day marriage notice period, the two and their respective families will announce their planned marriage many times in order to reveal some hidden things that do not comply with the church's regulations, such as close relatives prohibited by the church, or one of the persons has a previous marriage contract which has not been dissolved, etc. These measures are to make the marriage relationship more transparent on the one hand, and on the other hand, to purify the nature of marriage and avoid marriages that violate the norms. In addition, even if the two are engaged, it is forbidden for unmarried couples to live in the same room during the marriage notice period. From today's point of view, these measures are still powerful measures to protect marriage. At least the two of you can be more open to each other, you can raise issues that you didn't pay attention to before, and you can make things that are hidden from each other public. This is essentially treating marriage as a sacred thing. Our marriage today is too impetuous, and our attitude towards marriage is not serious enough. How many people use the slogan of liberating human nature to release their desires and throw away all the responsibilities they have? Only when we truly realize our responsibilities and undertake the corresponding obligations, can we have the courage to mention the so-called liberation of human nature. Otherwise it is debauchery. And after 40 days of marriage test, the next step is the last step to achieve a positive result. Marriage. Edward was thinking about a wedding in England in the Middle Ages, but his body was shaking unconsciously as the carriage moved forward. Oh, it's so uncomfortable. Edward lay in the carriage with a lifeless face, his head resting on Luna's round lap. Even the girl's scent pouring into Edward's nose could not stop his inner depression. Edward felt that his heart was broken. When he went to Windsor Manor a few days ago, he didn't feel much about riding in a carriage, and on the way to Gloucestershire, from morning to afternoon, Edward's stomach began to churn, and his brain didn't feel like his own. He didn't expect that a person who didn't get carsick in the previous life would actually get carsick in this life. Could it be because of the physique? Ouch! Edward vomited uncontrollably into the prepared tub, and immediately, the carriage was filled with a smell of stomach acid. Your Majesty, are you feeling better? Luna wiped Edward's lips with a sheep towel, and asked with a concerned face, full of reluctance. Yes. Your Majesty, why not stop the carriage for a while? Lucy came up with a good idea and tried to ask Edward. No need, long-term pain is worse than short-term pain. Let's keep going. But, it's nothing, it's getting dark, we can't spend the night in the wild. Edward's tone was full of unshakable emotions. Luna shook her head slightly at Lucy, signaling her to stop. Lucy stopped talking, and turned around unwillingly. Edward lay on Luna's lap again, watching the two little peaches shaking in front of him. His eyes gradually narrowed. Before he knew it, Edward slowly fell asleep. Luna and Lucy in the carriage breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks, Dream God. IP 001735. Okay, that's it, Lancaster Coup, you are so slow to update. 2ITTY, Zhuangshu Iao, Orange C, May proudly, Lily 599, Brother Mao with 56 legs, Lonely Boy, 01234, Hanbing Ziai, you're kidding, everyone's big vote support. Chapter 41 Secret Talk. Is this true? Catherine. The Baron was caught off guard by the happy news and Catherine lowered her head and smiled happily, tears mixed with joy. Thomas. Do you think my situation is dangerous? Catherine rubbed her delicate face with the Baron's hand. Catherine is 36 years old. In the 21st century, pregnancy and childbirth are dangerous things, let alone in the Middle Ages when medical care is simple. This is no less than a hell. It's okay. Catherine, I will invite the best doctor in England. The Baron seemed to feel unsafe, and said emphatically, don't be afraid, Catherine. I will invite the best doctor in Europa. No matter how much it costs. I will accompany you, Thomas. You are so kind. Catherine shed tears of excitement, and Baron Thomas' love words touched the softness of her heart. What a sensual woman. Hearing this, Edward curled his lips, disdainful in his heart. Under normal circumstances, the conception is 2 or 3 months later, that is to say, not long after Henry VIII died, they began to have an affair. And it is very likely that it started when Henry VIII was seriously ill. Thinking of this, Edward involuntarily fantasized that the color of the hat on his father Henry VIII's had turned oily green. Hoping that he would not have such a result, Edward quietly left and returned to his room the next day. Edward came to the restaurant. The Marquis of Northampton, the Duke of Houghton, and the Baroness Seymour were all present. Seeing Edward coming, they all got up. Good day. Your Majesty the King. Good day. Ladies and gentlemen, the arrival of Edward prompted the nobles to salute meticulously. For nobles, etiquette has completely penetrated into every aspect of ordinary life. The Marquis of Northampton, the Duke of Houghton, and Baron William leaned on their right chest with their left hands, took off their hats with their right hands, and bowed their bodies slightly forward while nodding to salute Edward. Both the Duke and Duchess of Somerset refused to attend the banquet, citing physical discomfort. The ladies need to bend their legs slightly and lift their hands slightly on both sides of the skirt, nodding to Edward. When eating in the Middle Ages, the host must be seated first before the guests can be seated. Therefore, Edward can only sit down after the Baroness and his wife are seated first, instead of sitting according to status like in China. Your Majesty. Gentlemen. Ladies. For the success of my wedding with Catherine, let's have a toast. The Baron first proposed to drink the first glass of wine. His face was flushed, and everyone could see that he must be in a very happy mood. All right, then I toasted and drank together. Edward was naturally unavoidable, raised the red wine, and took a sip. In the Middle Ages, as the host, it was obligatory to propose the first glass of wine. After the first glass of wine, the host and guest could toast each other, and just like in China, talking while eating and talking while drinking were allowed at that time. It was gradually considered impolite after the 17th century, and just like in Northeast China, both sides of a toast must toast to the end, which is not the case now. Take a sip of the saying. Fortunately, Edward has practiced since he was a child, otherwise he would really be unstoppable. Edward had just recovered from the impact of the red wine, and not long after, he saw the Baron pour himself another glass of wine and stood up. Your Majesty the King. Your Excellency the Duke and Duchess, and Your Excellency the Marquis. The Baron paused and cleared his throat. I'm here to announce an important matter. The Baron's face showed a blush, and Catherine beside him seemed to know what he was going to say. She quickly lowered her head, her face flushed to her neck. My wife, Miss Catherine Seymour, is about to bring a member of the Seymour family. At this point, Baron Seymour's excitement was beyond words. Is this true? My sister. The Marquis of Northampton was very concerned about the news. He felt very guilty about his sister since he was a child. She sacrificed too much for the Parr family. To explain here, in 1529, at the age of 17, Catherine married Edward Barrow, 2nd Baron Barrow of Gainsborough. Edward died in the spring of 1532. In 1534 she married John Neville, 3rd Baron Latimer of Snape, North Yorkshire. In 1536, during the Pilgrimage of Mercy, Catherine was taken hostage by northern rebels along with her 2 stepchildren. John Neville died in 1543. Basically, she married very old nobles, and their fertility was basically degraded. It was Catherine who became the Queen, William Parr became the Marquis of Northampton, and his uncle became the Duke of Houghton. It can be said that one person achieved the Tao, and the chicken and the dog ascended to heaven, so the Marquis is very concerned about Catherine's future life, and if she has children, Her position in the Seymour family will be further consolidated. Yes, William, it is a pleasant thing to receive the blessing of God. Oh, my God. Today is such a pleasant day. Lord Marquis of Northampton's exclamation was full of joy, and it could be seen how happy he was. The elderly Duke of Holden on the side also showed a smile on his old face, while the two ladies hurriedly left their seats, ran to Catherine's side, and passed on her pregnancy experience afterwards. The entire restaurant was covered by cheerful voices, and the Baron's laughter also echoed in the castle. After all, this is also his first heir, so the excitement is hard to restrain. It lasted until the afternoon, and the whole castle was immersed in a joyful atmosphere. Boom boom boom. Come in, squeak. Lucy bent her knees slightly, lifted the sides of her skirt, and saluted the Baroness and his wife. Respect your excellency the Baron. Your Majesty the King has something to discuss with you, and I would like to invite you to go to the study. Lucy walked in, and her crisp voice disturbed the Baron couple who were talking, which aroused the Baron's displeasure. Thomas, Edward invited you. There must be something to discuss with you. Catherine's voice was very gentle, persuading the Baron. You go first. Come back later, okay? The Lord Baron said to Catherine with indescribable tenderness and pampering. Lucy, let's go. Yes, Your Excellency the Baron. Baron Thomas faced Lucy, and regained the Baron's majestic expression in a short while. Baron Thomas arrived at the door of his study, which was brightly lit. Boom. Boom. Your Majesty, the Baron has arrived. Understood. Bring him in. Edward said without hesitation when he heard Lucy's voice squeak. Lucy brought Baron Thomas to Edward's eyes without Edward's instructions. Lucy left consciously and closed the door of the study. Dear uncle, I have something to discuss with you. Edward looked serious. Thanks to Prussian noble, Stardust, LXAX, Ken Casterku, Death Knight Commander, Kiss Love, everyone's support, this is a big update for the 56-legged Mage, the Prussian noble. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42. The Navy. My uncle. I am very sorry for what happened yesterday. Edward said sincerely. I can't help you much, it's nothing. It's just a trivial matter. Baron Thomas was very free and easy, but Edward, who was staring at him, still saw the trace of hatred in his eyes. After all, on the wedding day, my wife was bullied by my family members, which really lost face, and for nobles, face is the pursuit in life. I'm surprised by what Uncle Edward did. Edward said in a childish voice, after all, you are his younger brother, don't mention him, Edward. Baron Thomas said angrily, he doesn't treat me like a brother. As for what happened last night, uncle, I think it's mainly due to your status. Edward said solemnly, still staring into his eyes. What do you mean? Edward, I said the main reason is that Uncle Edward looks down on your status. Edward said with regret, after all, you are only a baron, and he is already a duke. As for Mrs. N, you know that her natal family was originally an earl, so she won't look down on Aunt Catherine. This is indeed the case. The Baron looked thoughtful. There was an indescribable gloom on his face, which seemed to indicate that he thought so in his heart. His right thumb was rubbing against the wedding ring on his left hand, and he seemed to be accumulating something. Edward successfully analyzed the cause and effect of yesterday's events for Baron Thomas, in order to awaken Baron Thomas' ambition, and even to use his ambition. And the reason Edward went to Thomas was for the navy in his hands. After all, he is now the #1 in the navy as king. Edward must master the army. England's navy has always been weaker than the army, and its importance is not as high as that of the army, so it has not entered the side of the regent. So for now, Edward can only have the opportunity to master the navy. Speaking of this, I have to mention England's navy. In the Middle Ages, Britain did not have a so-called royal navy. In fact, it did not even have real warships. In time of war, the king has the right to recruit ships and personnel, so they get out of their daily work and go to the sea battlefield to serve. Some kings also occasionally pay for some naval forces out of their own pockets, so these two parts of the army are combined to fight together during wartime. Wars broke out on the European continent from time to time. In fact, since the Norman conquest era, the British royal family has seized a large number of territories in France, and has to covet a larger territory. Hanging alone overseas, but constantly intervening in the war in Europe. The current Edwardian Tudors retained several small territories in France. Those chicken-thief British merchants saw and smelled huge business opportunities. In the beginning, some wealthy businessmen signed a contract with the king to contribute money in efforts to build a professional sea force for the imperial court, in exchange for trade privileges and tax-free policies. Later, this practice became popular in the whole society. In Bristol, the practice of colluding with officials and businessmen such as ports such as the Wookau Joint Defence was even more popular for a while. Henry VIII later discovered that it would be more cost-effective to form a dedicated fleet. But the fleet formed by the public at this time was not a battle fleet, but a means of transporting troops in the waters around Britain and the mainland. After his death, the entire fleet was sold for silver. During the Tudor dynasty, the royal family continued to use the practice of signing charter contracts with contractors. The only change was that the scale continued to expand, and the specific terms were constantly adjusted. Just 2 years after Columbus's first voyage, and 3 years before Henry VIII sent John Cabot to Newfoundland, Spain and Portugal negotiated and reached an agreement at Tordesillas, agreeing to use a meridian 370 leagues west of Cape Verde as the dividing line for defining its sphere of influence. All territories to the west of the frontier belonged to Spain and to the east to Portugal. When Henry VIII ascended the throne, all the sea property he inherited was only 5 ships, although he did not have the wealth that the second emperor should have. He still worked hard to create a standing fleet during his reign. Not only did he develop his navy to the size of more than 50 ships, but more importantly, this fleet is no longer a separate and improvised group of wandering soldiers, but has begun to take shape in a fixed organizational form. So there are many documents that regard him as the founder of the British Navy, but under this aggressive momentum, his strength is strong from the outside, and his navy is only a defensive force, because this is the critical moment of religious division, and he has no other distractions, and he has improved to a higher level. Henry VIII and his father Henry VIII also foresightedly established shipbuilding facilities which later developed into Portsmouth, Telford and Warriors naval shipyards. "My dear uncle, let's make a deal," Edward said to the Baron straightforwardly, without any delay or beating around the bush. "I want to borrow the navy under your command." "What? Edward, are you joking?" Baron Thomas seemed to hear a humorous joke. "My lord, this is not the time for joking." "I'm not joking, dear Lord of the Navy." Edward's expression was very serious, and he narrated in a flat voice without being disturbed by the Baron, as if he was telling someone else's story. "Then, my lord, why do you borrow your navy?" The Baron was infected by Edward's calm demeanor, and his tone became serious. "Minister, don't you know that the Thames from my distillery is sold all over Europe?" "Yes." "But, your Majesty, do you need the navy at your service?" "Yes." "You don't know, pirates are getting more and more rampant," Edward said shamelessly, still taking it for granted. "It's time for the Navy of England to serve His Majesty the King of England. I suppose you think so too." "My dear uncle, of course. It is an honor for all naval officers to serve His Majesty the King." Minister Thomas raised his hat as a sign of loyalty to the King. "I believe in your Excellency's ability. In my opinion, your title and ability do not quite match," Edward said solemnly, and a political deal was completed during the conversation. "Your Majesty, your decisions are always so wise." His Excellency the Baron was overwhelmed by the news, and his words trembled a little. "Thanks, Peter, Chi Binkson, Minhang Dream Talk, 56-legged Mao Jen, Hellsky number 1, Xiao Bei Veteran, NGCASD, Book Friend 6XXXX48, Book Friend 212XXXX16, Lily 599, Shell, Elegant Notes, Dancing in the Wind. The Buffalo, Lancaster Coup, Shyandi Shindeo, everyone supports you with your votes. I had already asked for leave today, but when I thought about it, I can't destroy my continuous update record for more than a month, and I can't let everyone's support down. So I gritted my teeth and updated. Thank you for your support. Chapter 43. Portsmouth. In 1547, on May 5th, England still gave Edward face, and it was a sunny day. At least it stayed sunny for most of the day. At noon, a carriage embroidered with red and white roses, protected by more than 20 knights around it, was moving forward slowly. If a knowledgeable nobleman saw it, he would know that it was a carriage that ruled the whole of England. A carriage of the Tudor royal family, and the dirt road built in the local area gradually became hard under the sun for a long time, as if to alleviate the symptoms of motion sickness of the teenager in the carriage. That's right. This carriage team passing through the local dirt road is His Majesty King Edward's party, who left Fort Sudeley not long ago after making a deal with Baron Thomas. At night, Edward took his maid, Lucy Luna, and more than 20 guards who had eaten and drank at the wedding banquet, and rushed to Portsmouth, a city that rose because of the navy. In fact, almost the entire English Navy is stationed in the small city of Portsmouth, so when you come here, you can find the English Navy. When King Henry VIII founded the Navy here in 1415, Portsmouth was just a small port, but after continuous expansion, Portsmouth became a British naval base and shipyard. Gloucestershire is 94 miles away from London, and 1 mile is equal to 1.6 kilometers, so Gloucestershire is about 151 kilometers away from London. Portsmouth is a port city at the southwestern tip of England, 70 miles southwest of London. With a population of about 3,000 people, it is connected to the commercial port of Southampton in the west, the English Channel in the south, and the mouth of Portsmouth Bay. The location is very dangerous and the urban area is located on Porton Island. However, the north of the island is only separated from the main island of England by water, and there are many bridges connected, which looks like a peninsula. The west port of the city is like a bottle, and the width of the entrance is less than 270 meters. The sea area of the port area is more than 6 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide, which can accommodate giant ships such as aircraft carriers. The harbor is calm and easy to defend. With the Isle of Wight as a natural barrier, it has long been the largest and most important naval base in the UK, and about 135 miles from Gloucester to Portsmouth Mile, equivalent to a distance of 216 kilometers at that time, the horse-drawn carriage could travel 5 kilometers in an hour. Calculated by walking 12 hours a day, Edward would have to sit in the carriage for 3.5 days. Therefore, at this time, His Majesty Edward was already lying in Luna's arms, dizzy, ready to use the gentleness of a girl to relieve the pain in his body every night. It is the most difficult to sleep in the carriage, even with a thick goose-down quilt. So Edward fell asleep counting Luna's little peaches, and of course Lucy's little oranges, Your Majesty. The city of Portsmouth is 10 miles ahead. The big man Sean, who is leading the knights to explore the way, was sitting on a horse, with his left hand on his right chest, his right hand taking off his hat, his body slightly bowed, and he walked into the carriage. Edward said, "Oh, really? Then let's speed up." Edward was pleasantly surprised when he heard Sean's voice outside the car, and couldn't help saying to the driver, "As you wish, My Majesty." The groom immediately responded, "Follow your orders, Your Majesty." Sean's voice outside the car was still so loud that even Edward in the car felt a little deafening. "You guys, it's time to pull yourself together." Sean kept walking beside the carriage, shouting at the guards with his loud voice. The knights, who were relaxing, suddenly sat up straight, taking pictures of Zion's lust. They silently began to urge the horses under them to speed up. Basically no one dared to express any opinions. The acceleration of the carriage brought even greater dizziness to Edward, but the long-term pain is not as good as the short-term pain. He could only bear it. Then Edward and his party carefully crossed a wooden bridge only 8 feet wide and 1 mile long before they saw the real Portsmouth city. After half an hour, there was a dilapidated city wall in front of Edward and the others, and the market within the city walls. The entire city wall is more than 20 feet high, about 7 meters high. Because Portsmouth is a port city, the city wall has only been built to surround it. Looking at the small city wall in front of me, it looks like the height of a 2-story rural building in the 21st century. In ancient China, such a city wall was a joke. But in today's Europe, this is already a very good defensive building. The guards at the gate saw a carriage slowly approaching the gate, followed by more than 20 knights. This is a good opportunity to fish for oil and water. The young guard couldn't bear his temper, and just wanted to jump out to get some benefits and enrich his wallet. "Hey, little guy, you are dying." The old lacey beside him patted Mork on the head hastily, stopping his reckless behavior. "You are dying." Old Lacey had a nervous look on his face, and the wrinkles on his old face were rolled into a ball, which further highlighted his old state. "Little Mork, didn't you see the pattern on the carriage?" Old Lacey taught him, with his mouth on his ear, and his hands tightly pulling on Mork's sleeves. After Edward and his party passed by, he let go of his voice and continued, "That's the royal family's carriage." Old Lacey's words were not long, but they were no less than a thunderbolt in Mork's heart, blasting him to the core. "That. Thank you, Uncle Lacey," Mork said in a trembling voice. "Little guy, learn slowly." Old Lacey returned to his usual lazy look, but Mokay never underestimated him again. After the city, the messy streets and buildings formed a strange spider web, and many medieval towns developed haphazard rather than planned construction. In the Middle Ages, cities developed rapidly wherever transportation was convenient, skilled workers were skilled, security was good, and food and water were plentiful. But civic leaders lacked long-term planning. Many central cities, including London, Florence, Cologne, and Milan, developed in the original Roman settlements. However, they developed in the same way in the Middle Ages, except for some core areas that still maintained the crisscross shape of ancient streets. The Roman town format was very different. Streets tend to conform to a rough central concentration pattern, but sometimes there are some sudden and rapid changes, and the street direction is often controlled by mountains, boulders, and rivers. The streets of Portsmouth were less than 10 feet wide, and the open drains on both sides were full of sewage and garbage. Suddenly, a stench ran into the carriage. The knights also covered their noses one after another, speeding up like the carriage. Head to Borgest Castle in the heart of the city. The curved streets make the city look bigger. It also reverses the direction of the strong winter winds, resulting in an even distribution of sunlight and shade, giving each house a different view, and this will also have military uses. The bends and turns will make the invading army feel trapped in a maze, which will help increase the defense of the defenders. Thanks, Stardust, Prussian nobleman, Book Friend 19xxxx46, Happy Little, I Am a Mummy, Lancaster Coup, 56-legged Brother Mao, Speechless Affair, Icy Cool, Love and Sorrow, Legolas Windwalker, Walker, Orange Sea, Book Friends 1,815,162,028, NRPHF 5, Adorable Hang Hang, Soviet Armored Infantry, Big Brother Rumble, Cheyenne Sword. Everyone's support is the greatest encouragement for me. Create a new group. Welcome to join the gentlemen in England, group number 631,774,182. Also, at the request of a majority of book lovers, Flying Fish Guard has been changed to Night Angel. I haven't read the starting point book review on the computer version recently, and I haven't seen many people's opinions. I'm sorry. In the future, everyone can comment in the group. Chapter 44 Fort Borgest. Borgest Castle is a medieval castle that occupies the commanding heights of Portsmouth Harbour. Because of its geographical location, it has been the main defense facility of the Solent Strait for hundreds of years. The castle was originally built in the late 3rd century as the only Roman stronghold in northern Europe, then as a Saxon stronghold. A grand castle was built in the 12th century. Borgest Castle is located on the front line of the entire Hundred Years' War between Britain and France, and it is also a staging point for expeditions to France and cross-channel raids. In 1396, Richard II converted the castle into a palace, so the castle presented to Edward was dilapidated, wide, and mediocre, and the dark-blade middle-aged man who was kneeling in front of Edward had already packed the room in Borgest Castle ahead of time. Of course, this is also the result of Edward's original order, otherwise the newly established Night Angel would not be so active. Your Majesty, your vassal Ed Walson is here to see you. The skinny Ed knelt in front of the carriage with an excited face, his tone full of excitement. Oh. Are you Ed Walson from Darkblade? Edward stepped out of the carriage, looked at the thin man kneeling on one knee in front of him, and couldn't help but confirm. Yes. Your Majesty, I was sent to Hampshire by Captain Ham a month ago, and I will be stationed in Hampshire for a long time. Ed pointed to the little man beside him. This is Andre, now take charge of the liaison. He's smart. Your Majesty, if you have anything to do, please let me know. Ed introduced Andre, and praised him by the way. Then, Dear Ed, you are Ed Walson who won the first place last time. I also issued the appointment of a centurion to you. Can you introduce our navy to me? Edward speaking to Ed. Edward was very polite to his direct subordinates, without the arrogance common to nobles in his tone. As for Andre, please show us the way. Edward said. Ed naturally couldn't object. And the little Andre consciously walked ahead and led the way. As for the guards and maids, they also consciously followed behind, walking silently. Your Majesty, the Navy currently has 57 warships, 11 of which are large carracks known as big ships, and more than 15 are Calais and Calais ships, and with a size of 2,000 people. This is the most powerful English Navy in history. Ed's voice was full of admiration, as if excited by England's strength. So which nobleman in the Navy is the strongest? Edward asked. This is an opportunity to test Ed. After all, it is difficult to figure out the situation of the Navy in such a short period of time. Your Majesty, your servant has figured it out. Ed said carefully, looking at Edward's expression. Currently, the younger brother of the Earl of Southampton, James Leo Shelley, is in the entire Navy. Ed also paid attention to Edward's steps, and bowed his body respectfully to report to Edward he is the most powerful captain in the Navy. In addition to mastering the monarch, he indirectly controls almost a quarter of the ships. Really? I remember Southampton of the Leo Shelley family is not far from Portsmouth. Edward interrupted suddenly. Yes. Your Majesty. Your wisdom is brighter than the sun in the sky. I admire your memory very much. Okay. Enough is enough. Edward sounded quite comfortable, but still stopped him. Yes. 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 Ed didn't expect that flattering would be rejected by the king. This is not normal. Resisting the curiosity in his heart, Ed responded carefully. Oh. The Earl of Southampton actually sent his younger brother to the Navy, Your Majesty. The Earl's family's fleet has been doing business with France, and I heard that the annual profit reaches tens of thousands of pounds. Ed said, showing envy, his eyes flickering with unknown colors. At that time, nobles from all over the world would join the army, especially as senior generals in the army, and the navy at that time was almost composed of pirates and coastal fishermen. Except for Spain and Portugal, no nobleman liked the navy at present. Almost only Prince Henry of Portugal personally participated in the naval expedition as an aristocrat, and there are very few other aristocrats. The two slowly walked into the castle, and Edward took a look. Although the interior was very dilapidated, it was neat and clean, which showed that Ed had put his heart into it. Ed, you are very good. I hope I can see your family appear in the Heraldry Bureau in London. Edward praised Ed. Your Majesty. Please tell André if you have anything to do, and he will notify me. It is my honor to serve you. After receiving Edward's hint, Ed showed a cheerful atmosphere. Your Majesty. I'll take my leave. Ed bent his waist and stepped back. Turning around, he said to André in a stern tone, André, you must serve His Majesty the King well. In England, the Heraldry Bureau is where nobles register their family crests. Even low-end nobles such as knights and judges have to register here. Otherwise, the status of nobility is not recognized. Ed returned to his home with excited steps. A rented house in the center of Portsmouth. Ed's rented house is on the second floor. First of all, he needs to pass a wooden staircase. I don't know if this staircase has not been repaired for a long time. Every time Ed walked up the stairs, he could hear the depressing sound of the planks, as if they were about to collapse, which made people feel a little flustered. Through the stairs, Ed walked through a narrow corridor to the top, which was the apartment rented by Ed's family. Opening the door, you can see that although the room is small, the things inside are organized in an orderly manner. Even children's toys are placed on the shelves. Is that you, Ed? Ed asked when he heard his wife, Mary, cooking dinner in the kitchen. Yes. Mary. It's me, Ed Walson. Ed replied, and asked again, where are Mayina and Rodan? They're playing with a rubber ball you bought in the room. Ed seemed to be able to hear Mary's joy. After all, life is much better now than before, and the reward system established by Edward made them look forward to life. After the dinner was arranged neatly, the family of four came to pray before the meal, and even the 4-year-old Ioyina and the 2-year-old Luodan did it decently. Ed picked up the bread made of a mixture of rye and barley in front of him, and put it into his mouth. While eating, chatting Mary. The king is here today. Yes. How are you coping with the situation? Mary couldn't wait to ask. Obviously, Mary attached great importance to her husband's future. Nothing? Ed said, pretending not to care, but the joy on his face betrayed him. He said he was looking forward to seeing my family at the Bureau of Arms, thanks to Son of Heaven, LXEX, Yun-style smile, Prussian nobleman, Mamluk cavalry, Lancaster coup, Zhuanshu Iao, Yuri Yefimovich Serov, Zinfeng, 56-legged Maoj, Qtanghen. It's 1111, it's really slow to update you. That here Murksha, Hanbing Ziae, Xiao Bei veteran, Legolas Windrunner, Walker, everyone's big vote support. It's for me biggest encouragement. Create a new group. Welcome to join the gentlemen in England. Group number 631,774,182. Also, at the request of a majority of book lovers, Flying Fish Guard has been changed to Night Angel. I haven't read the starting point book review on the computer version recently, and I haven't seen many people's opinions. I'm sorry. In the future, everyone can come to the group to comment. Chapter 45. Major James. My God. Is this true? Ed? Mary looked at her husband in surprise, her eyes full of disbelief. Yes. I think His Majesty values me very much. Ed, like his wife, had a happy expression on his face. I think, if I do more work for His Majesty this time, His Majesty will definitely remember me in his heart. Ed said in a guessing tone. That's for sure. Just impress His Majesty the King. Your hope of becoming a nobleman will definitely increase. Mary looked lovingly at Yana and Rodan, who are swallowing bread. Our little angels will become nobles, so they don't have to work as hard as us. Mary. I will definitely make our little angel a gentleman. Ed said comfortingly. holding his wife's hands that were rough from doing housework. You will also become a noble lady, and often go to high-class banquets. Ed looked at the pair of jade hands. His tone gradually became low. I won't do housework by myself anymore. Yes, Ed, I think God will bless us, Mary said with emotion on this side. Edward and Andre slowly visited the castle, looking at the castle that was once used as a military base in a quite natural way. As for sisters Luna and the guards, they had already gone to tidy up the room and put away their belongings, leaving only the big Zion to follow, climbing up to the watchtower of the castle. Edward saw the whole picture of Portsmouth. There are a large number of naval ships parked on the left side of the city, merchant ships coming and going, and a medium-sized port. The soldiers of the ship and the sailors of the merchant ship disembarked one by one and walked towards a messy street near the port. This is also the most prosperous place in Portsmouth. This street is full of taverns and brothels, two favorite places for soldiers and sailors, as well as fruit stalls, grain stores, and cloth stores that provide ship supplies. Other than that, the rest are either natives or families of the Navy, which is dull compared to the port. According to Edward's visual inspection, the small town only accounts for 1/5 of the entire island, and there are almost no people in other places, and only a few villages provide food and vegetables for the city. Watching the busy merchant ships shuttling between the ports, Edward couldn't help asking, Andre, how many of those merchant ships belong to the Leo Shalai family? Andre didn't expect Edward to ask these questions, and he was asked all of a sudden. Your Majesty, I haven't counted this, Andre said embarrassingly, and added quickly after a while, I heard from those sailors that almost 1/3 of the merchant ships belong to the Southampton family, and 1/3 belong to his dependent family. Real merchant ships accounted for 1/3 of them, and I also heard from hearsay. Your Majesty, Andre carefully glanced at Edward's face, afraid of offending the ruler of England. Why is His Majesty the King not as tempered as people say? On the contrary, he was very cordial, as expected. He was the representative of the legend. Edward didn't care about Andre's small movements, and couldn't help being surprised. He didn't expect that the Earl of Southampton already owned such a large merchant ship, which was almost one of the few withered nobles in the Tudor period. Moreover, he was very enlightened, able to abandon the traditional aristocratic way of managing the land, and started to do business. At first glance, he was a member of the new aristocrats recorded in the history books and the future Edward's mind. Andre can't know Andre's little mind. Edward has no way of knowing Andre. Tomorrow, you ask that James Leo Shalai to meet me here. Yes, My Majesty. Andre imitated Ed's movements and saluted, but because he had not been trained, Edward felt very awkward after Andre left. Edward admired this city of his own alone. Speaking of this, it is a bit embarrassing. The capital of the entire England, London, is not under the jurisdiction of the king. It is actually an autonomous city. The majestic capital of England is not in the hands of the king, but is completely governed by a group of businessmen. It is largely the work of William the Conqueror, Norman, who won the Battle of Hastings and was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey in 1066. It was he who built the White Tower, the core part of the Tower of London. At the same time, he also negotiated tax laws with businessmen, declared the independence of the City of London, and had the right to self-government. The king has no right to collect taxes in the capital, and has no right to manage and appoint officials in London, which is unthinkable in ancient China. And Edward's predecessors in the past did not try to take back the management rights, but used the royal power to influence the operation of London, just lying down and counting money. Therefore, the urban environment in London is so harsh, but Edward can't interfere with it. Anyway, those big businessmen won't pay for it. But Portsmouth is different. This is a naval city. The entire city is almost managed by naval officers, and Edward is the loyal object of the Navy. Portsmouth can be said to be his. After lusting for a while, Edward went to rest. After all, he had been on the road for a few days. Early the next morning, Andre brought James Leo Shalai, who was dressed in noble clothes, to Borgest Castle. Good day, Your Majesty the King. James saluted first, expressing his respect for the king. Good day, Major Leo Shalai. Because James is not the first heir to the Earl of Southampton and does not have a title, Edward directly called him by his rank. Mr. Major, if you don't mind, accompany me to take a look around the port of Portsmouth. Of course. This is my honor. It is the duty of a subject to serve His Majesty the Great King. Major James agreed with great interest. Although he didn't understand why Edward came to Portsmouth, James still had to work hard to cooperate. Walking on the soft beach, Edward rubbed the sand on the beach leisurely, talking to James from time to time. Dear Mr. Major, what do you think of the present Navy, Your Majesty? I think the funding for the Navy should be strengthened. As soon as he mentioned his major, James became interested. Our Navy in England can only protect itself. It is incomparable with Spain and Portugal. It cannot be compared with the Netherlands. Edward understands James' thoughts very well. The Navy has always been on the edge, with little funding and no one to care about. Naturally, there is no meritorious service to be made. For the nobles, they can't inherit much property, and they don't have a title. They can only make a living by themselves. Besides, his father helped him to the position of lieutenant commander, which was already interesting enough, and it was unlikely that he would use the power of the family to help him again. Therefore, the ass determines the head, and the Navy is strong and he is valued, so that he can skyrocket and truly stabilize the chassis. Thanks, gynecologist Zio Nuanen, book friend 160,520,113,042,017, Cheyenne A. Sword, the Q Tang Heng, Ming Shi Zinfeng, book friend 138XXXX94, Yao De Gong Jian, 56 Leg Mao brother, ignorance is not wrong, Legolas Windrunner, Lancaster Coup, everyone's big support. Chapter 46, a letter. So, my lieutenant commander, do you think that strengthening the Navy can compare with Spain in a short time? Edward's questioning was like a sharp sword directly piercing James' heart, making him speechless. He opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. Then what do you think the Navy can do to England at present? Edward didn't give James a chance and asked a series of questions in a short period of time. Can the Navy suppress refugees like the army? Can it go to Scotland to fight the northern barbarians? This. James didn't know what to say. As soon as he opened his mouth, Edward interrupted him. Are you trying to say that the Navy can help merchant ships fight pirates? Edward had an expression that I understood, as if he had read his heart, and James also had a surprised look on his face. He really didn't expect that Edward would guess his thoughts. In fact, in addition to working hard with the enemy's navy, isn't the Navy just escorting the Navy? Besides, relying on the poor appearance of the English Navy, fighting against Spain is just sending food. Now it can only escort and fight pirates. My dear Mr. Major, I think that only the Leo Shalai family is currently focusing on maritime trade. Hearing Edward say this in front of his face, James felt a little ashamed. After all, the current nobles are still focusing on running the manor, and they have a contemptuous attitude towards businessmen, especially the nobles who do business, who are despised in the aristocratic circle. It just so happened that Leo Shalai was such a family. A family that ran business in person but was ridiculed by the nobles collectively. That, Your Majesty. James stammered, trying to explain something. Don't get me wrong, Major James, I'm not laughing at the noble Leo Shalai family. I think my fire wine has already spread all over Europa. Edward said appropriately, alleviating the embarrassing atmosphere. What? My lord. You said that the fire wine is yours. That's right. I think your brother already knows about it. And your level is too low, so you don't have the right to know. Edward's words were a bit irritating, but they were true. Your Majesty. Is this true? James still couldn't believe that the most noble Tudor family in England would still run a business. That's right. I won't look down on you, Edward said with certainty. However, the ministers of the Regent Council will not do business, nor will they see the contribution of the Navy, Your Majesty. What do you need your servant to do? After hearing so much from Edward and knowing that His Majesty the King would not ask him to say these things, James finally understood that Edward needed him. So he asked cautiously, hey, I finally got the hang of it. Edward wiped away the sweat in his heart. He was exhausted. My dear James, do you think the ministers of the Council of Regents know anything about England's Navy, Your Majesty? I think the ministers in London have to deal with the affairs of the whole of England every day. They are busy all day, and they don't know much about the Navy. James used words carefully, and looked at Edward from time to time. I was very upset and uneasy, and didn't understand what it meant for Edward to get involved with a minister in London. So, if there is a decree from London, it still needs to be carefully studied by the generals of the Navy. However, I think the Navy of England should still be the Navy of the Tudor royal family. Yes, I am resolutely loyal to the Tudor royal family. Facing the oppression in Edward's language, James immediately said loyally, and also used an emphatic tone. Also, I think almost the entire Navy is loyal to the royal family. Edward noticed the word almost in James' words, which shows that there are still people in the Navy who intervene in London. That's right, even if they don't care about the Navy anymore, London's ministers still need to have eyeliners to observe. After all, this is also a big force, and it cannot be kept out of London's sight. Then, I think, Mr. Major, you will definitely let all the Navy return to the embrace of the royal family. Isn't that right? Edward specially emphasized the pronunciation of the word all, for fear that Mr. Major would not understand. Yes. My Majesty, the Navy will definitely serve the royal family. Edward was very satisfied with Major James' statement, so he decided to give him hope. The tried and tested trick was used again. Major James. God loves England to have men like you in the Navy. For a talent like you, I think the House of Lords still lacks a seat for you, Your Majesty. Under the witness of God, your vassal James Leo Shelley, I and my descendants will always be loyal to you and your successor. James said with strong surprise. So, in this sunny weather, Edward has another courtier who is loyal to him, a lieutenant commander. It can be seen that the name is still very important. The evil dividing line. After James returned home, he felt that he needed to discuss this matter with his brother. So, he wrote a letter in detail, introducing Edward's willingness to win over, but did not mention his allegiance, and his family's servants hurriedly rode to Southampton Port, the residence of the Leo Shelley family. The horse galloped down, and at night, the servant finally arrived at the Earl's mansion in Southampton. Boom. 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 The messenger knocked on the door of the master's house. Who is it? A question came from inside the door. It's me. Hughes. The second young master wrote a letter to the Earl. This is an urgent letter, please open the door and let me in. Hughes hurriedly explained, feeling very urgent. After all, the young master's tone was very urgent. Squeak. The door of the Earl's mansion opened, and Hughes took the letter and walked straight to the butler's room. The butler was instructing several maids, and when he saw Hughes coming in front of him, he couldn't help asking, Hughes, what did Master James send you back for? Butler Marn, this is a letter from the young master to the Earl. Hughes was afraid that the butler would not take it seriously, so he hurriedly said, the young master said this matter is very important, please deliver it to the Earl yourself. Really? Then give it to me. Hearing what he said, the butler stopped admonishing the maid and rushed to the study with the letter. Be careful, you guys, the Earl's mansion does not lack your maids. Yes, Master Steward. Several little maids responded delicately, with a few tears on their faces, looking very pitiful. The butler rushed to the study panting. After all, he was in his 40s and his physical strength was a bit behind Lord Earl. I am Marn. The butler knocked on the door of the study, disturbing the Earl of Southampton, who is reading. Come in. What's the matter? Dear Marn. The Earl said kindly, and he trusted the butler Marn, who grew up with him. Master Earl. Master James wrote you a letter, saying it is a very urgent matter. Marn's tone was still very respectful, and he had always been accurate about his identity. Thanks, Jinha Eugen, Cheyenne Sword, Mithang Menghua, Book Friend 1,815,162,023, Mamluk Cavalry, Prussian Nobleman, Hell Sky No. 1, Book Friend 200XXXX27, Brother Mao with 56 legs, Q Tung Heng, Walker, Frefried, Lancaster Coup, Legolas Windrunner, thank you for your support. Chapter 47. Peaceful London. Edward couldn't see the scene of Lord Earl's daytime prostitution, but in his current state, even if he saw it, he couldn't do anything at this time in London. The first commander of the Dark Blade, Guy Ham, was reading the information sent by the Centurions from all over England, summarizing it and sending it to Edward after 3 months of development. Under the temptation of making full use of King Edward's name, considerable income and the possibility of becoming a knight, a large number of bankrupt gentlemen, sons of wealthy businessmen, and handicraftsmen happily joined the Dark Blade family. After all, Edward positioned the Dark Blade as a translucent organization, just like the CIA in the United States. With shocking power and mystery in a short period of time, the Dark Blade grew bigger and bigger like a blown balloon. Currently, there are more than 300 members of the Dark Blade in London, including resident personnel from 10 counties. There are a total of about 500 members, while Edward's guards only have more than 300 members. Of course, with a large number of people, the monthly salary has reached £800, and this is only 10 counties in England, and there are only 39 counties in England, and the coverage of Dark Blade is only England. A quarter of so Gay's role as commander-in-chief is not worthy of his name, although the coverage area is not wide, but because it is just established, there is no experience, and all messy things are reported to London, which makes the commander-in-chief busy every day. For example, what Guy sees now, dear sir, the Duke of Buckingham in Buckinghamshire did not know what he ate today, and he went to the toilet all day. And he slowly got better after the Duchess invited a doctor. According to the younger brother of the housekeeper's uncle, the Duke had diarrhea after eating eggs and soy milk. My God, I didn't expect to have diarrhea after eating. I thought it was the curse of the devil again. This is the most reliable letter among all the letters he saw today. What strange sound next door disappeared before? What noble children are being bullied by other noble children? The knight married the rich merchant's daughter, and got a rich dowry. And so on. However, after Guy invited a person who used to be the secretary of the county sheriff, the whole dark blade slowly got on the right track. Guy threw away the unfinished letter, and continued to pick up the letter at the top of the tall stack of letters on the right-hand side. Dear Commander-in-Chief. Excuse me. A middle-aged man in an English gentleman's uniform put his left hand on his right chest and took off his hat to salute Guy. Hearing this voice, Guy raised his head and looked at his new recruit, an elderly college student who had worked as a secretary. Mr. Turks. Don't be so polite. If you have something to say, you can speak directly. Guy said in a gentle tone, and his words were very polite. Guy attaches great importance to this talent he has dug out. After all, in the entire Dark Blade organization, he is the only one who has truly received a college education. And he is the only veteran who has experience in handling copywriting. Then, dear Mr. Ham, said Turk solemnly, without the slightest feeling of guilt, it's time to get off work. Can I go home, Mr. Turks? When it's time to get off work, you can go back directly. Don't tell me. Guy said to him with a pleasant face, without the slightest intention of fussing. The same will be the case in the future. You can go back directly, Lord Ham. Although this is one of the promises you made when you invited me, I still want to ask you for instructions, okay? Mr. Turks, do whatever you want. As long as you like it. Guy looked helpless, and had no way to deal with this traditional English gentleman. Mr. Turks walked out of Dark Blade's headquarters slowly, and walked back to his house in London step by step. Adam Turks has an ancestral building in London. Although it is a bit dilapidated, it can still be lived in the past. He was the secretary of the sheriff, and he came from a noble family. The main reason is that after he accidentally offended the Earl of Buckingham, he spent almost the entire family's wealth. Please ask the Sheriff of Buckinghamshire to take care of it. Remove the Earl's wrath. Mr. Turks, who has no means of making money, has no choice but to bring his family to London, a small two-story building left to him by his grandmother, to make a living. Then, a month after his arrival in London, the little savings he had left were exhausted, and he was forced to take up the job of the king's agent, which he was ashamed of. The strict Mr. Turks has to go home in time every day, because he is in his 30s this year and has 5 children. It can only be said that it is God's blessing that he survived 5 children in this terrible Middle Ages with a high child mortality rate. His wife couldn't come here in a hurry, and he and his wife were very affectionate, so he naturally wanted to help take care of her, let her breathe slowly, and take a rest. At this time, the Duke of Somerset's mansion, the busy Lord Edward, is seriously dealing with a new reform bill. For the Duke, who has always been committed to reform, he has always been full of energy and joy in the matter of religious reform. My Lord Duke. My Lord Duke. The young butler who was waiting on the side had just received an important message and had to disturb him. What's the matter? My housekeeper. Didn't you see that I was thinking? Edward hated the most when someone interrupted him when he was thinking, especially when he was thinking about the most important religious reform at present. He felt extremely irritable. Your Excellency. The main reason is that you let me pay attention to the news of His Majesty the King. There are new trends recently. The butler's tone was very careful. He knew that the Duke's temper was always very violent, and he was afraid of making him angry. After all, he didn't have the same friendship with the Duke as his own father did, so he couldn't be careless. Speak. My steward, let me see what happened to my king's nephew. Duke Edward immediately restrained his temper and acted as if he was listening. The Duke didn't care much about his nephew, who is the king. However, since his performance at the coronation ceremony, his understanding has been refreshed, and thus learned that this little nephew has been selling wine since he was 6 years old, and he was the one who sold the famous strong wine on the market. This time he couldn't help but not pay attention to it, especially after he became the king. The power was forcing him to keep a close eye on Edward. He could not relax, and he did not dare to relax his surveillance of the king. Recently, His Majesty the King came to Portsmouth Harbour after attending the wedding of Lord Baron Thomas, and met James Le Chatelet, the younger brother of the Earl of Southampton. After accompanying him for a while, Major James wrote a letter and sent it back to Southampton Port. Handed it to the Earl of Southampton. At this time, the Earl of Warwick's mansion was brightly lit, and the busy Earl stopped working, listening carefully to the butler's report on Edward's movements. Thanks, NRPHF 5. Book friend 1,815,162,023. Book friend 213XXXX09. Prussian noblemaness is for noisy empty tunnel. Orange C. 2 big pluses. Chapter 48. Back to London. What the hell is my nephew doing? What is the connection between the Southampton family and him? Duke Edward had a question in his heart. With a puzzled expression on his face, I heard that it is for renting the fleet of the Leo Shalai family to go east to the Principality of Moscow and the Principality of Lithuania to sell fire wine. Outgoing news: the people there seem to like this kind of wine very much, and the profit is very high. His Majesty the King wants to sell it directly. Really? This explains the past. It seems that our king has inherited the tradition of the previous kings, and still likes shiny and cute gold coins. His Excellency the Duke has no doubts about him. After all, Edward is his nephew, and he is just run England on his behalf, and sooner or later it will be handed over to him. The little king likes gold coins? That's not necessarily the case. You send someone to keep an eye on you. Don't let your guard down. The Earl of Warwick caressed the porcelain from the east with a look of love on his face, but the words he said were resounding. Yes. I will send people to watch closely. Don't let them relax. The butler immediately responded with a very decisive voice. At present, for the Earl of Warwick, the king without real power is not the main target of his attention. He has been keeping an eye on Somerset, who controls the Regency Council. The Duke's every move. Although the purpose of both Duke Edward and Duke Edward is to reform, he still has an ulterior motive. In the morning, Edward looked at the sea in front of him without interest after spending a few days on the beach. Andre, what do you think of the sea? Edward asked Andre behind him boredly, with a trace of exploration in his tone regarding the people's views on the sea in the Middle Ages. Edward felt that he still needed to understand. Did he often say that he came from the masses and went to the masses? Your Majesty the King. Are you sure you are asking me? Andre looked around, speaking unconfidently. His little face was full of shock. That's right. Is there anyone else named Andre here? Edward said jokingly, looking at Andre with a nervous face. He couldn't help but smile knowingly. Didn't I get nervous when I saw a small county magistrate before? I was happy for a long time after shaking hands with a county magistrate. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. I think the sea is a trap from the devil. Although it is full of cheese, what awaits us is still death. Andre slowly adapted to the dialogue with the king, speaking more and more fluently. In the Middle Ages, the nobles looked down on the common people, for fear that a single word would tarnish their noble blood, and Edward's innate intimacy infected Andre's heart, giving him a sense of honor to be respected. Some people say that as long as you walk into the sea, you're walking into the devil's tool for harvesting souls. Andre said with a frightened expression on his face. The last time I boarded a merchant ship with Mr. Walson. Sure enough, Your Majesty. I felt the magic of the devil. My brain suddenly became dizzy, and my body became limp. It was very uncomfortable. Edward turned on the automatic filtering mode for Andre's words, and was extremely speechless in his heart. Sure enough, the nobles despised the commoners for a reason. Ordinary commoners were basically ignorant and didn't even know about seasickness. However, this is also the reason why Andre has lived in England for a long time, and he has a sense of fear of the sea. This also represents the mainstream opinion in England. The civilians in the coastal areas are definitely different. It seems that you should ask a fisherman. Edward walked down the stairs slowly, and Andre followed him, very conscious of a follower. Luna. Pack your things. We're heading back to London, Edward said to Luna in the distance. Regardless of her surprised expression, he went straight to his precious study room, with the temperament of His Majesty the King. My God. I'm going back so soon. Even Luna's gentle nature couldn't help being tortured helplessly by Edward. Looking at the hall that had just been cleaned, Luna felt like crying. So the whole castle was busy. Luna and Lucy packed up Edward's belongings, as well as Edward's cherished books. Soon, Nightshot's loud voice spread throughout the entire castle, and there was another flutter at this time. In Windsor Castle in Berkshire, a group of teenagers were standing hard in the sun on the grass in the backyard, their bodies straight. These are the results of Edward's first mission for the Dark Blade agents, and almost all the orphans in London and the west of England are here. There were more than 3,000 people in total, including about 1,000 children aged 0 to 4, and almost the entire Windsor Castle was hired to take care of them by serf women. About 100 of them. It is estimated that there are about 2,000 people, divided into 3 teams. Among them, children aged 4 to 6 were divided into a team, which was also the largest team, with about 1,000 people, both male and female, trained by more than 10 maids and more than 30 guards. It's more about taking care than training. In addition to teaching them to stand and run, they also invited teachers to teach them how to read and write. Among the remaining 1,000 people, there are more than 800 children in the age range of 6 to 10 years old. During the day, they follow Edward's training plan, which is based on his plan to cut down the military training in college. In the evening, they will be taught by the teachers who have worked hard all day, learn knowledge and practice English. The remaining 200 people were all children over 10 years old, and they were training completely according to Edward's training outline. Jack is one of them. Ever since he saw Guy, Jack had been dangling in front of him a lot. Finally, he was spotted by Guy and became a member of the orphan army. Therefore, the sad Jack can only stand upright with his thin body, and stand in a military posture under the beautiful sunshine. To be honest, this kind of life is harder than being exploited by the restaurant owner frequently, and Jack is always planning an escape plan in his heart every day. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, run for 3 miles, and then stand in a military posture until 12 noon for dinner. Half an hour later, after lunch, Jack was driven to sleep by the guards, that is, to rest in the wooden house built for them by the guards of Windsor Castle. In fact, Jack has never been able to figure out why he sleeps during the day. Doesn't he only sleep at night? With doubts, Jack was woken up by the guards at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the time to stand in a military posture began again. They had dinner at 5:30 in the evening, the teachers had classes at 6 o'clock, and they could have a good rest at 8:00. In addition to training, what can comfort Jack is the 3 meals that are usually out of reach. In an era when commoners ate 2 meals and nobles only ate 3 meals, it was such a blessing to be able to eat 3 meals of bread every day. The fragrant soft bread, the sticky barley porridge, and the pork that appeared on the table from time to time made Jack's escape plan delayed under the persuasion of his stomach. Thanks, Zinheu, the silent Fei, the flag bearer on the left, the gynecological little warm man, Jinhao Eugene, 56-legged brother Mao, book friend 1,815,162,023, NRPHF5, that year Murksha, ignorance is not wrong, Lily 599, Legacy Windwalker, book friend 160,520,113,042,017, thank you for your support. The recent collection makes me sad. It's all down to single digits. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49: Salary Increase. After 2 months of such painful and happy days, Jack has undergone changes visible to the naked eye. If he hadn't seen his own appearance while washing his face, Jack would hardly have known that the person in front of him was himself in the past. Due to long-term hunger, there was less than 2 tails of meat all over the body, and putting on clothes was similar to hanging clothes on a clothes rack. But now, with the clothes on his body, it was bulging, and when he grabbed his fist, he could see obvious muscles on his arms, and there was still flesh on the inner thighs. The most obvious thing is the height, at most 3 feet when he first arrived, and now Jack secretly measured it, and it was almost 4 feet correct. He still learned the unit of feet from his teacher at night. Jack didn't know that there was such a unit of measurement before. Jack quietly admired his handsome face, except for a little darker. There are not many shortcomings. He hadn't thought about this before. He looked at his face leisurely, thinking about how to find food to take care of his stomach all day long. Jack, come on, the time is almost up, or the instructor will scold you. This is his friend in the same bed, urging him to gather. His bed was just a long plank, 20 feet long and 7 feet wide, and each one had his own quilt, and he slept side by side. Here we come. Wait for a while. Jack carefully tidied up the new clothes that were handed out, and wiped them very preciously, with a look of love on his face. For Jack, it's the only new piece of clothing he's worn so far, and there's a reason he cherishes it. Jack ran to Alan in front of him in 3 steps and 2 steps, stopped and walked in a row with him. Hey, Alan. What do you think? The coach told us to meet His Majesty the King. I don't know. But no matter what he looks like, I only know that he is the benefactor who saved my sister and me. Alan's face was sincere and grateful. Jack expressed his understanding. It is said that Ellen's sister was starving to death at the time, so she came to Windsor Castle to beg by luck, praying for the kindness of the nobles living in this castle. Who knows? Alan and his sister were taken in, and it was later learned that this was His Majesty's castle. Ellen and his sister have regarded the king as a benefactor ever since. In fact, Jack has been here for a long time, and he is also grateful to His Majesty the King, who has never masked his face, especially compared with his previous life. This is heaven. The two came to the big grass field where they usually practiced. The foot-long grass was trampled to the ground by them and turned into weeds at this time. There were more than 2,000 people standing on the grass. Jack and Alan found their own square team, lined up, and stood in the military posture they had trained for 2 months. It was 8 o'clock one after another, and all the orphans had come to the grassland, and no one dared to be absent. Edward arrived at Windsor Castle last night. After resting all night, his whole body was alive and kicking, and he returned to his previous appearance. I remember that just after returning last night, when he saw the neat rows of wooden houses in front of the castle, he felt endless joy in his heart. These are the cornerstones for him to conquer the British Isles and fight for world hegemony in the future, Uncle Smith. Are these orphans sent by Dark Blade? Edward looked at Baron Smith standing beside him, and couldn't help asking, Yes, Your Majesty. These are all sent by your Dark Blade. Baron Smith was still so confident. However, there are more than 1,000 babies under the age of 4 who are taken care of by Madame Anna, the head maid. Exclamation mark. When Edward heard the news, he couldn't believe it. There were so many abandoned babies in England, which really refreshed Edward's impression of England. So, did you practice the training syllabus I wrote? Dear Lord Baron, of course, I did exactly what you said. Smith said loudly, beating his chest vigorously in order to show that he had completed the task. Seriously, Edward felt pain just looking at it. Thinking about this hammer, I won't be able to stay with a bed for life, my lord. Tomorrow, you will see the children I trained with the other guards, and they will give you a big surprise. Baron Smith made a promise, also to show off. As a result, he talked in a big way. Yes, my Uncle Smith. Tomorrow I will see the results of your 2 months. If I am satisfied, everyone in your guards will increase their salary by 5 floors. Edward also made a promise. There was a sweet pie hanging in front of them, which was enough to make them cry. Is this true, my lord? Baron Smith asked in disbelief. Are you suspicious of me? Uncle Smith, of course not. Your Majesty. Smith shook his head hastily, and hastily explained, that's good. I'll look forward to a good result tomorrow. Edward shook Baron Smith's head and went back to his room to rest. Then Baron Smith told the good news to the boys in the entire guard group, and the boys, whose average age was only 20 years old, almost jumped up with joy. Since they left home and became the king's bodyguards, they no longer have the support of the family, and live on the king's salary every month. You must know that since Henry VIII established £5 a month in 1540, prices in England have almost quadrupled, while their salaries have remained unchanged. The salary that could support a family in the past is of course easy to support a person now. But for a guard with a family, the whole family is living a tight life, especially in the big city of London, and if it goes up 5 floors, then there will be a salary of £7.5 per month, which is enough for the family to live a comfortable life. In fact, Edward is also planning to raise the salaries of the guards, so using this excuse, let's just raise them now. It's even better. Therefore, the monthly salary of Edward's light-hired guards is £3,750, which is an unimaginable figure for ordinary people. For the aristocrats, this is an impressive figure, but for Edward, whose monthly income is close to £40,000, it is drizzle. So, the excited guards came to the dormitory of the orphan army overnight, as if they had been on hormones, and greeted them one by one to perform well tomorrow. Then he showed a kind smile and said that as long as people behave well, there will be great benefits. As for those who were dragging their feet, the coaches just showed a dark smile, and Jack shuddered even thinking about it. Thus, there was a scene where Jack and Alan went to the grass in a team. There was also a scene where Edward put an end to the urge to sleep for a while and got up early. Thanks. Don't worry about 2 copies. Minhang Menghua, Lancaster Coup, Book Friend 160,328,233,758,532, XG Jason, Cheyenne Wei Shindeo, Prussian Nobleman, IP 001735, Zinhaiu, Legolas Windwalker, 56-legged Brother Mao. It's really slow to update you. There are fewer and fewer collections. Why is this? Chapter 50, an embarrassing review. Early in the morning, under Luna's careful service, Edward was dressed in a noble military uniform. Looking extraordinarily handsome and majestic, he hurried to the gate of the castle, followed by 2 beautiful maids, and 4 heroic guards also walked behind the maids with serious expressions on their faces. And for the coach, who had been waiting for a long time, that is, the coach composed of more than 100 guards, Edward showed the demeanor of a king. Hey, dude. The king is here. The little William, who was discussing the salary increase with his companion, squinted at Edward in the distance, and immediately slapped his companion who was still about to talk, not forgetting to remind the guards around him who were talking. No one seemed to hear William's voice, including Baron Smith, the captain of the guard, who was the loudest. Edward's arrival made the guards who had been laughing and discussing with each other lose their expressions, and the Baron who reacted became a serious guard. God bless you, My Majesty. More than 100 people neatly knelt on the ground, shouting blessings in unison. May the Lord bless you too, my knights. Edward also nodded with a smile on his face, doing a good job of saving face. In fact, in the entire guard group, there are less than 20 real knights, and they are all court knights, the kind without fiefs. Edward's gentle and non-irritating smile relieved the nervousness of the guards, causing the guards who felt rude just now to put smiles on their faces and stand up neatly. Mr. Cavaliers, are you confident about today? Edward asked tentatively. Of course, my lord, I will keep you in shock. Edward saw the Alexander knight who usually didn't like to talk. For this knight who was deeply loved by Henry VIII, Edward still respected him more, especially when he heard that he had a special relationship with Henry VIII. He respected him even more. After all, he still has Henry VIII's stuff in his body, and he didn't fulfill his filial piety during his lifetime, so it is necessary for Edward to do his best after death. Looking at the handsome knight in front of him, and remembering that he has not yet married a wife and had children, Edward's tone became softer. Oh, since Knight Alexander is so confident, I'll just wait and see. Then Edward boarded the carriage exclusive to the royal family. This carriage is hollowed out, with a lot of gold inlaid on the surface, which looks very rich. This is Edward's view, and in Baron Smith's view, this symbolizes the wealth and strength of the royal family, and he also has a sense of pride under the watchful eyes of the maids and guards. The 4 handsome white horses were commanded by the groom, and the horses pulled the gorgeous carriage to the grassland. As for the problem that it was only 3 miles away, no one mentioned it. The knights mounted their precious horses one after another, and it was Baron Smith who attracted the attention in particular. Baron Smith rode his new horse, and he was holding his precious black horse, Iron Shield, beside him. This scene was particularly interesting, and we Edward sat leisurely in the carriage, so we couldn't see this scene, leaving only the entertainment time of the knights. I said, "Dear Baron, why do you have to ride a horse and lead a horse?" Knight Alexander asked loudly, relying on the good relationship between the two, with a teasing look on his face. "Alexander, you know that the Iron Shield is a gift from God. How could I forget it at such a glorious moment?" Baron Smith's tone was full of love for the Iron Shield, and he still did not forget it. He stroked the Iron Shield's horse's head with his hand. In this parade ceremony, the knights can follow Edward's carriage and be admired by the children together. For people like me who are blessed by God, ordinary people like you will not understand. As he spoke, Baron Smith arrogantly left all the knights who were staring at each other, and followed Edward on his horse first. The remaining knights were speechless. Alexander shrugged and said helplessly, "Let's go too, gentlemen knights." As he said that, Alexander turned over and got on his horse, and lightly patted the tall horse under his crotch with a whip. The horse also took a quick step, following Baron Smith. The remaining knights also reacted, mounted their horses one after another, and chased after Edward. At this time, on the grass, the guards who had stayed before went to reteach everyone how to behave when His Majesty the King inspected everyone. "Wait until His Majesty's carriage passes by your team. Be sure to half kneel." Dozens of knights who spoke rode back and forth in the team on big horses, and kept announcing the rules and "God bless you." "Great Edward, do you hear that?" Jack listened carefully to what the knight said, although he had memorized it by heart last night. "And you just need to follow the actions and words of the people in front." This is what the guards said when they came to the youngest team. After all, expecting a group of 4 to 6-year-old children to remember these words is no less than a sow being able to climb a tree. Seeing a group of little radish heads nodding, the guards could only choose to believe them. So, when Edward's carriage came to the pasture, he saw that there were big men in front and small men in the back, standing very regularly. Nothing wrong, Jack was standing at the front. When he saw Edward approaching the team for the first time, he immediately half knelt down and shouted loudly, "God bless you, great His Majesty Edward." So, when Edward was estimated to be half a mile away from the crowd, all the children suddenly knelt down and shouted, "God bless you, great Majesty Edward." Suddenly, the sound rushed towards Edward like a wave, reminding him of the scene of raising the national flag and singing the national anthem in elementary school. This made Edward very embarrassed, and hurriedly urged the groom to speed up. The faces of Baron Smith, Knight Alexander and others who followed the carriage were full of embarrassment. I don't know how much I want to kill the impulse to take the lead in shouting at the child. Edward looked at the children kneeling in rows on the carriage, and felt a great sense of satisfaction in his heart. After so many years of rebirth, he finally did not travel in vain, especially when I saw the group of little radish heads scrambling behind, and the silly little guys standing still. My inner feelings became more profound, and it was not easy to achieve this step soon. Some bold children raised their heads, such as Jack, who saw Edward's face. The children remembered Edward's appearance deeply in their hearts, and almost the children who knew something said in their hearts, "This is the person who saved me and the object of my allegiance. Thanks, book friend 160,520,113,042,017, Express Zinfeng, XG Jason, Q Tangheng, Prussian nobleman, book friend 1,887,429,398, IP 001735. Book friend 134XXXX23, Zuwen, Xiao Bei old man, best man, book friend 210XXXX21, speechless my Fei, long time no see, master fan has traversed Aurora for 3,000 years, book friend 222XXXX20, Lancaster Coup, end of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.